Going to move, let's see, we don't have anything on the agenda for recognition. I'm going to move to approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 2nd, 2024 meeting as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Megan. Oh, there we go. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Annika. We'll give it to Annika this one. Any questions or comments about the meeting agenda minutes or the meeting minutes? January 2nd? It's a long time ago. Last time we met. Okay. Can I get a vote for approval of the meeting minutes? All in favor? Great. No. And Tommy, you abstaining? Tommy's abstaining. He was not here. All right, now we're going to move to public comment. The board welcomes and recognizes the value of public comment, and to ensure public comment is fair and orderly, we follow procedures outlined in our board policy, BEDH, and we ask that all members of the public do so as well. We follow this policy to help keep the meeting civil, respectful, and productive. We also hope that this allows for all community members who would like to speak to be heard. We ask that speakers use the designated podium when making their comments and speak into the microphone. If you are interested in speaking, please wait until recognized by myself. Comments made by individuals are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes at a meeting. The clock will be visible on screen to help keep track of time. After 3 minutes, the timer will go off and comments should be wrapped up. If you're here to make comment, please state your name and town of residence before beginning your remarks. Residents and staff members will be given priority over non-residents. Our policy allows for 30 minutes total of public comment, although that can be modified at the discretion of the board. And as a reminder, public comment is not a time for discussion, Q&A, or debate between the board and the speakers. Rather, it is a chance for members of the public to express their opinions in school and educational matters, and the board will not comment on remarks made by speakers during the public comment period. Lastly, please keep comments respectful and civil. That includes members of the audience. Please do not interrupt or respond to speakers' comments. We also ask that comments are addressed to myself as the chair, and please do not direct comments at or about individuals in our schools or community. So I would welcome if anyone's here for public comment. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll be moving on to some presentations. I'm really excited to have Steve Blatt and Associates here to present a draft concept design for a new school project. You can be welcome to the podium, and is there a presentation that
Yes, we have.
Awesome. And just to bring everyone up to speed, as a reminder, we've looked a few months ago, the school board voted to start looking at an on-campus option. We went into an agreement for concept design with Stephen Blatt and Associates, and they were bringing a draft concept design for the new school project for the board to have a first look at tonight. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Hi, thanks. I have a soft voice. Thanks very much. We're really very happy to be involved with SAD 51 again after several wonderful projects on your campus. I was thinking tonight, I lived in Cumberland for 35 years over by the fairground, and all 3 of my children went through the middle school and the high school before we got to work on them. So when I say, how do you like the middle school? They don't know. Anyway, we're really happy to work with the young students. We have done several early childhood and elementary schools, and we really enjoy making this space supportive for little people so that they understand what it looks like, how you go in, what it feels like. And so the scale of the building and the sense of the building is important to us. We want our buildings to be handsome, but we really want them to work well. Pat Carroll is a landscape architect and site designer who's worked with my office for 30 years, and he's been involved in all of the work on your campus, and I'd like him to introduce to you our ideas for the entire campus, and then we'll focus down on the plans of the school. Pat Carroll.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Pat Carroll. I'm with Carroll Associates. We're landscape architects. And as Steve said, we've been involved in we've touched just about everything on this campus over the past 20 years or so. I think it started with the new middle school. We've done a bunch of work at the high school, Mabel Wilson, and now we get the opportunity to kind of complete the quad, so to speak, of the four corners of the Greeley campus. This is also an opportunity to take another larger look at the entire campus and look at circulation, parking, utilities, drainage, and how the entire campus seems to want to work. I know we did a master plan back when the middle school was first envisioned, and a lot of that master plan has come to fruition. But there are some things that I know that Jeff has voiced some concerns in the past about some of the some circulation issues and traffic issues internally. Part of the original concept, and it still holds true, I think, is that you should be able to reach every building on this site internally, that you don't need to go out onto Main Street, come down to Tuttle Road, and come in the other way. I mean, you can do that, but ideally, if you're going from one school to the other, especially as a either staff or students going back and forth, you should be able to do that internally, and I think it works to that extent now, and I think it's going to. This gives us an opportunity to really kind of address some of the issues relating to that. But I think I didn't mean to do that, but this is okay. The real focus here is on the new on the new primary school, and it was fortuitous that the district initially acquired the Wyatt property, which is directly adjacent to the school. And I don't have a pointer, but it's kind of this section of land right in here. And we started initially looking at that and realized that it was just slightly smaller than what it really needed to be. And so the district worked through some negotiations with the abutter, Mr. Campbell, and I believe that you guys are all aware of trying to acquire a small triangular piece of property that really kind of allows us then to kind of develop the school site as it really needs to be. The intent here is to utilize, again, the existing circulation internally, and so all the major circulation for this new school comes in off of Main Street, off the main entry, just to the west side of this building here, actually, and then it comes into kind of the school circulation around the school itself. We're actually proposing and maybe I can. Oops, I can't do that. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Help. What'd I do?
I don't know what you did. Where are we here? Here we go. So
All right,
there's
I want to go back.
So then you're just going to do left and right.
Okay, that's what I thought
Advance.
I did, but
Can we make it bigger?
There isn't a way to make it bigger. I'm sorry about that.
But now you can pinpoint this.
Mm-hmm. And you can do this.
yeah, that's what I think I was doing, and it went haywire.
I'm gonna stay right up here with you.
So this major entrance here is going to remain as is, and as you know from probably driving back and forth on this thousands of times, currently the driveway comes in and it loops up tighter to the property line and then across. We're planning on rearranging the major driveway through the site so that we're gonna split that parking lot that's out there. So there'll be about 80 spaces on the PAC side, and about, well, we have a total of about 90-some spaces associated on the other side of the driveway, which would be dedicated to the new school. So the way that would work would be, there would be some staff parking along the perimeter here. You'd come in and actually, you'd loop around, there'd be a parent drop-off zone in this area, and then another parent drop-off zone here. This is the major bus loop, so the buses would come in, loop through here and back out, and then head over to, probably to Mabel Wilson, or come from Mabel Wilson to here. So again, we've got about 90-some spaces directly associated with the new school. There's Steve's going to get into the design of the school itself, but the main entrance is here. So it faces out onto kind of all this circulation, and it's highly visible. The playground area is in the rear, so there'll be a large playground area in the back here for for K and 1. And then the pre-K program is in this end of the building, and there's a dedicated pre-K playground that's separated from the other playground, just because we like to, the little tiny kiddos like to be, they don't like to be bullied so much. And then the service area for the school would be here, and there's no kitchen in the school. It's going to be serviced from the kitchen in Mabel Wilson. They'll just be shuttling vans back and forth with food. This site currently is occupied by the maintenance building here, and that maintenance building is proposed to be moved, if I can move this around, down to the west side or south side of the high school over here, and which is currently, it doesn't impact any parking, and the thought here is that it might be a 2-story building where you've got access from the parking lot side for vehicles and maintenance bays, and then there might be a lower level that's where all the mowing equipment and things like that is capped, that has easy access directly out onto the fields. So that would be relocated there. We're also proposing, and hopefully I can do this without messing it up. Here we go. There's a series of other improvements that, as I mentioned, we're really beginning to take a look at, and some of these have been kind of flushed out, and others are just kind of, I just want to identify just as kind of to highlight that we're looking at them, and they're some of these are carried in the budget, and but they're all things that we still need to address. So again, number one here is the school and the work associated with that. One of the things that we've had some initial meetings with the town, and they have 2 concerns, and I know the district does too, about traffic on Main Street and traffic on Tuttle Road. So we've been working with them, and they, what they are proposing that the district take a look at is on Main Street here, there's about a 1,000-foot section of road of Main Street that that we would widen 1 lane wider than what's there. And that would allow through traffic to move by with a turn lane, dedicated turn lane. And Bill Shane is convinced that we can do that within the right-of-way, and it's a pretty minor widening. It's about 1,000 lineal feet, and that should solve a lot of the problem that currently exists out on Main Street. The second thing is on Tuttle Road, he would like to see, again, a widening from basically from the fire station down to Mabel Wilson, and the addition of a sidewalk there. I think that the residents on that side of Tuttle Road have been crying for a sidewalk for a long time, and this is an opportunity to do that. I believe he's also has a commitment from the state to install 2 of the flashing pedestrian crossing signs on Tuttle Road, which will make crossings much safer and easier for the students and residents in the town. again, as part of this improvement of circulation, one of the things we're really looking at is how to better kind of provide circulation drop-off for buses and parents within the campus. And that includes really taking a hard look at Mabel Wilson and how the circulation there really works. Right now, it's a little convoluted. As you know, the buses come in off of the middle school drive, and they come in and drop off here. Parents come in off of this drive by the administration building, and they come in and kind of stack up and drop off on this side of the building. The office is on this side of the building over here, so it's not a real clear, kind of highly visible location for arrival. So one of the thoughts here is to reconfigure this a little bit and come in here and provide a bus loop that comes across this side. So basically reorient the front door to the north side of the building. So there'd be a bus loop here, a parent drop off here, and then we're considering also reconfiguring some of the parking along Tuttle Road here to provide, again, a secondary drop-off zone on the building side of that parking lot, which would help reduce the scale of that parking a bit. We could get a little bit of landscaping in there, and it would also provide a space. I know, 9 o'clock in the morning and in the afternoon, it's kind of a zoo out there right now. So providing more drop-off and pick-up spaces for parents is really one of the goals here. We're also looking at, in order to kind of accommodate some of the parking that we end up losing by moving driveways and so forth around here, and to deal with a kind of an aesthetic issue as much as anything, we're looking at putting that storm drain bioswale that's out in front of the PAC, putting that underground in chambers, and then parking on top of that. And we can get about 32 to 35 spaces on top of that that could be utilized for student parking or event parking. And it kind of just cleans up that whole area quite a bit. So that's another kind of item that we're looking at. We're looking at if we need it, and I'm not sure we do. I did a parking count today, and with the new parking we're proposing here and the reconfiguration over here, we're adding about 160 parking spaces to the campus over what's here now. And you all realize that once the pre-K school is built, there's really not going to be much of a difference in staff. The staff is just going to move from Mabel Wilson to this new school, and some of the staff is going to move from Mabel Wilson down to the middle school. So it's a pretty generous amount of additional parking. We think that that's probably an appropriate number. But if there is additional parking that needs to happen, we're thinking that the area basically just to right outside the door here could potentially be expanded for some additional parking down there. And then finally, it's in Steve's budget, and I know it's been talked about for several years here, is to develop a turf field where the soccer field, where the game field is now. So those are all items that we're looking at, and we're getting into some of them in more detail than others right now, but they're all supposedly part of this project, and hopefully will lead to some pretty major improvements within the campus. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and he can talk about the building.
I'll try to do that. Thanks. The proposed building is sort of strange shaped, and I want to describe this to you. Then I'm going to go into a number of slides which show you different elements, but I did want to speak to you about the fact that the fairly unusual boundary of the property impacts the design of the school. So it's not just an arbitrary fan. We needed to get as close to the west border as we could, the southwest, and we needed to respect this border along the current drive through the campus. That has driven the design, as well as the fact that, as Pat mentioned, we want the, let's see, did I just lose my, good, thanks. We wanted the entrance to be smack dab in the middle. So that's right there. You enter sort of in the middle of the school, not in an edge. And then I'm going to go through a bunch of stuff with you as we go through the slides. As I just mentioned, the main entrance is going to be easy to see, and also it's important that this is the office, and this is the principal, and this is the nurse clinic, and all of these have eyes out on the approach to the school. Then, as Pat mentioned, we wanted to keep vehicles away from play students, so we put the building in between them. And not only do you not look at a bunch of cars when you approach the school, but we keep them far away from each other for safety, for noise, for pollution, all of that stuff. We also wanted to make sure that we had some community meeting spaces, and so we put those all over here. This is the multipurpose room that will be used for phys ed. This is the cafeteria. So the places where the community can come, the places where a lot of students gathered together making noise, we put over to the side. And so that when you come to an event here, you come in the front door and immediately hang a right. And the students come in and go left. This shows you that as students come in and go left, right around the office, and the walls to the office will be windowed so you can follow the students in. In general, this is the younger students, the youngest students, pre-K. As you go down this corridor, the first grade peels off and goes up a stairway to the second floor, and the K heads straight ahead and goes to their floor. So this is first grade, and this, excuse me, that was K. This is first grade upstairs. And this shows you that that corner sits over this corner right here, and this corner sits over this corner here. And that has an important point. All of this is just a little over 1 story tall. All of this is 1 story. And all of this is 1 story. The 2 story sits back from the edge around this arc. And that's so as the smaller students approach the school, they approach a 1 story building. They don't come into a little door in a big face. So we've kept the scale down, and there are windows everywhere. These are what I call pods. On the first floor, there are 3 pods of classrooms. These have 4 classrooms. This one has 3 classrooms plus a flex space. These are the youngest students. These are 4 pre-K classrooms, and these are 2 flex classrooms. And on the upper floor, these are 3 pods of first grade classrooms. You live in a neighborhood of 4 classrooms. That's it. There are no long corridors. There are no doors after doors after doors. So, for instance, a first grader comes in the morning, goes upstairs right here, and lives in one of these pods. And they can go anywhere in the school, but this is home, these 4 classrooms. And each of these pods has a small group room, each one of them, and they each have some storage closets. It's the same on the first floor. The Ks have a small group room for each group, and even the earliest, youngest children, the pre-Ks, they have a gathering space here where they can meet together and dance or sing or cry. This is keeping the concept of scale small. The classrooms are generous, but there aren't a lot of them together. We have created an unusual room right in the middle of the school, right off the front door. And that's because Leanne and Jeff and Scott and I were talking about libraries. And little kids don't do research. Little kids go and look and touch and listen. So we've created what we call the round room, and it's immediately off the entrance, and it has windows around it. It has a wonderful round skylight in the roof, and it's just for looking and listening. We call it the round room because it's round, but it's right in the middle, and we hope that it's a meeting room to come together and play with books. We have built in expansion of 6 classrooms on the second floor out over these classrooms on the end. So the second floor only goes this far. We can add, without doing site work or foundation work or ripping up the campus, 6 classrooms. We could do 2 at a time. We could do 4 or all 6 at once. And that's so we don't run into a Mabel Wilson issue with portables. So there's 100 students expansion that could be done relatively inexpensively. The foundations are there. The steel is there, the slab is there at the roof, and so you build on top of it. We have done it several different communities, and it's worked well. You can't occupy these classrooms during construction, so you build a wall inside right there while there's construction going on above you. That's why we have flex classrooms everywhere, so that if we need to pull students out and move them to another classroom temporarily, we can. Is that it for me? Okay, good. That's the idea of the school, that corridors are short and then they turn. Even this long corridor bends right here, so that even though it's kind of long here, it's broken here, and there's an only 2-story space in the school is right here with a big window here bringing light in and view out. That's the stairwell. And then it bends again here. We've got some special ed spaces. We've got a staff area. We've got a room for itinerants. We've got room for consultants. We have speech classrooms, 1 on each floor. On the second floor, with the older students, we have smaller flex spaces, so you can have a smaller group, but we also have the largest flex space, which is here, with movable walls at 2 locations, so that you can have any size group studying a project. You also, if you had a bulge coming through in enrollment. You could have 3 smaller classrooms. Each classroom in the school has its own toilet. The earliest childhood have direct access out to their playground so that they can come and go into this playground. All deliveries are over here, far away. This is music and art. I would like to put windows here so that as you approach the school, you can see what the students are doing. And we did this fan design not only in response to the boundary, but also because these are wonderful courtyards which bring light into all classrooms. We did this first at the East End School in Portland, where we splayed the classroom wings. And we've done it now in a school under construction up in Skowhegan. And they work. And I think that's a really good idea to do here. Okay, as I mentioned, we have flex classrooms in this orange. They're everywhere. That means you don't have to go all the way to the other side of the school to find an extra classroom. That's a lot. You've been patient. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will close by saying that this is designed for 500 students. It can be expanded to close to 600 students. I think it would feel very, very good on opening day with 425 students. It'll be fine. It's a small-scale school. So, happy to answer questions. I bet Pat is too, and thanks for your patience.
Thank you so much. I do think there will be some questions. So I'd like to, I know I've had a chance to ask some questions along with the facilities committee, but this is the first chance that the full board has gotten a little peek at what you've been working on. So I'd like to see if anyone has some questions to start.
Can I follow up? We, in the facilities meeting, saw it the other day. Can you go to the slide with the outside, with the bus loop and the, so one thing we asked a lot about was the drop-off area and the parking. And so I see you did adjust it. So the bus loop, is that a double loop now in the sense the buses go in one loop and
That new one didn't go in. Pat?
Yeah, let me, I'll just point.
Okay.
So what happens, and I'm sorry that we can't blow this up, but bus loop is here, and similar to what occurs over at the middle school, there's an inside loop here that's a drop-off area, and also I think there's about 10 parking spaces in the middle.
Thank you.
I'm not sure we need those from a count point of view, but I'm sure they'll get a lot of use because it's almost a direct access into the front door to pick up your kids. So bus loop, the buses, I think there's about 7 or 8 buses that will fit in here. There's about, I think there's 10 drop-off spaces, parallel drop-off spaces, and then another 10 that we're parking. And then in addition to that, this is where another drop-off space, so somebody would come in here, circle around, and drop off along this side of the building too. So there's a total of about 20 parallel spaces that parents could use to just pull up and drop off, or maybe short-term parking. And then another 90-some spaces that would be staff and visitor parking.
And then that on the left of the bus loop, that's an area parents could park and walk in?
Could park here and walk in, yes. So I know we heard that kind of at the facilities committee the other day.
Yes, I see you've been very responsive. Thank you. We've kind of
And that's
mentioned that a
where
lot,
we
yeah.
actually, because originally we were trying to maintain the existing circulation here.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of cutting everything pretty tight up there. So by moving it down, we don't really lose much parking in here. We just allocate it differently within the site.
And then the high schoolers could park in that number 6.
And the high schoolers can park over here.
Is it equivalent? Is it an equivalent amount of parking that they've lost that they gain in the 6?
We've lost, I think there's 50 spaces in here that would be lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's 32 here, but there's a net total of, net increase of about 160 total on the campus. So, I mean, it depends on how you want to manage that. think
We need to
Jeff
remember
Jeff had talked about perhaps having high schoolers park over here if need be.
We should just remember that we should have about half the staff in Mabel Wilson that we had. So the net increase on the campus isn't, we don't think, significant, although we're growing, and we will grow. But I think the people that we may have to ask to walk a little bit more are the high school students from parking, but there will be parking for them.
I hear high school students like to walk, right? Good for them.
It's good for you.
Tom, did you?
Yeah, so I have 3 questions. One, you mentioned that in the event of an expansion, the first floor classrooms would have to be taken offline. What's the timeline for that? Like, how long would they be offline?
We did this up in Auburn on a school we designed and built, and 5 years later we added 2 classrooms. And I think it took less than a full school year to build. But to be conservative, we have those 6 classrooms elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting for an updated enrollment projection. And we'll see how quickly the need for those 6 classrooms is going to come upon us.
Okay. So conservatively, we would assume that they would be offline for an entire academic year.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I don't think it would require bringing portables to the new school.
Okay.
Try to preclude that.
Yeah. The second question I have is about the phys ed space. I was wondering what that looks like.
The phys ed space and the cafeteria we have thought about at length. And we did a K3 up in Farmington a few years ago, and their phys ed space is about 3,000 square feet. We designed you a 50 by 60 square foot, 3,000 square foot phys ed space. We think that's pretty good for this age and size child, 3,000 square feet. Our cafeteria is 1,500 square feet. It's the same, it's literally half the size of Mabel Wilson's cafeteria, because the pre-Ks usually don't go to the cafeteria, they eat in classrooms. So you've got 4 lunches of 100 students, and that fits pretty well. One of the things I do want to point out is that when, I'm going to do this, give me a minute. When students finish lunch, they don't have to go back to their classrooms. They go out here and they go along this path to the playground. So they don't reverse, they don't tromp through the school on the way out to recess or to after lunch or before lunch.
So part of the reason I ask is, especially during basketball season, court time is hard to come by, and I assume that this is not going to alleviate that issue based on the size of the space.
I think that would be an out-of-scale room if we built a basketball court for first grade down. I really do.
Mm.
Now, you can persuade me if you can persuade the superintendent, but we tried to keep the scale down.
That would be a bonus. You're completely right about the age group. The third question I have is about the widening and sidewalks on Tuttle Road. I was curious why that doesn't continue down to the middle school entrance.
It may. We just, and I'm going to go back here. You know, we had an initial meeting with Bill Shane and Carla at the town, and he indicated what he thought was that it should go from the fire station to Mabel Wilson crosswalk. Now, he didn't, he didn't mention that it should go all the way down to the middle school entrance, but, you know, we do have a traffic engineer on our team, and one of their charges is to really look at the circulation, both on-site and off-site. And they'll be making some recommendations about that. It very well could get expanded down that far.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Can you, oh, sorry. On this campus design, what you're showing us is including the potential additional property?
Yes.
Can you show us where that is on the plan and how it would change things if we did not have that property?
That property line is right there. So it's this triangular piece of property that comes down here, across, and over. So it's pretty critical to the school design.
Can I follow up on that? Anne, were you done?
Oh, yep.
So that parking lot north or on the
Mhm.
Main Street side of the school it's a loop, and the parents pull through for drop-off, and the service area is in the back of it. But the parking and island in the middle is two, like, cars this way and cars this way,
No.
correct?
No, there's only cars one way here. So this would be double loaded, an aisle with parking on both sides.
Okay, so
Then it comes around, and there's no parking, there's no pull-in parking on this side. All that's there is just a drive-through with some parallel parking lots.
So, just hypothetically, if that land were not purchased, and I'm making light, I don't mean to make light of this, I realize it's a lot of work, but if that became just one side of parking, not the two, not the middle and the side, could that be sort of, again, I don't mean to make light of it, but scooched over, or that one fan bent more? Could the plan be designed in a way that if we take away that parking, at least part of that parking, do we gain enough to not need the pizza
Probably
slice?
not without a pretty major redesign of the building, I don't think, because the wider part of the parcel that we're looking at. I mean, you could maybe take this and turn it this way or something, and we could look at that, but I think it's going to be really tight, and you're going to lose.
Those of us down here can't hear unless you speak right into the mic. At least I
sorry.
can't.
I think you're going to lose the opportunity to have dedicated parking specifically for the school. It's going to start squeezing a lot of that.
Do you also think it would limit the expandability of the school? Some of the opportunities that you were talking about expanding, if we asked to scale back, if that land wasn't able to be acquired?
Well, as Pat mentioned, we'd redesign the school. We'd come up with a different design, and we would make sure that there was expandability. And expanding up on a tight site is more logical than expanding out. We couldn't do that. As you notice, we don't want to expand out on this footprint. We want to go up. But if for some reason that land became not available, we would redesign.
And what would we lose? I guess why was this put forward instead of?
We would we try to make parking as proximate as we can, so that it's not a hassle for staff to get in and out. And we wanted to get drop-off close by because of the age of the children. Another important thing is the playground. I mean, we're out on the outskirts. We should have enough playground, and the students coming from Mabel Wilson have had terrific playground. even though it's now occupied by portables. But we walked this site several times. We walked it with Scott and Jeff. We walked it with Mr. Campbell, discussed everything, and came to what we thought was a pretty logical proposal.
Yeah, it would be here.
Can I just highlight a couple things that we talked about on Friday when we saw this plan for the first time in facilities that I think are important? And the first is the drop-off, where you have the main entrance. One of the things that you didn't mention, but we did talk about, is that the buildings that are at the main entrance are the office and the nurse, but also probably the SRO space, and how visible that entrance would be to the office and to the people that need to see who's coming in, and how there will be sort of a locked vestibule. And I think that that's a really nice thing to highlight and to point out, that as you walk through the school, the littles go straight ahead to pre-K. The middle littles hang a left, and then the big guys go upstairs.
The guys go here and up, the Ks go straight ahead, and the little littles peel off first.
But how there is a locked door, right? Because this is a situation where so many, if the kids don't take a bus, these are parents walking them in, and there are booster seats, and just how important it was to have this be a visible entrance for school safety, particularly for the age group. So that was one thing I just wanted to point out that we didn't really get to tonight, but I think is important to highlight. And then the other thing was, I just thought it was very, very smart to have all the facilities on the outer side of the building nearest the parking lot. So you've got the lunchroom and the phys ed space, but then all of those other rooms there are sort of the support.
So there's mechanical, there's the phys ed teacher and storage, there's electrical, there's chemical storage, recycling, general storage, chair storage, all the storages. In fact, there's a maker storage right here in the middle of things. Because if you don't do that, storage ends up in the corners.
But just how nice of a buffer that was to have that away from the pre-K playground and away from the K and 1 playground, and just how all the deliveries are made to one end of the school and not the other, and how it really segregates the kids and not just in a sort of keep them away from pollution and noise, but in a really nice, safe way to have them outside away from the cars.
Well, you mentioned something about security. I want you to know that these doors are locked. You can get into the vestibule, but you can't go any further. You have to get buzzed into the office, at which time, if you are buzzed in and everything's okay, you can go into the school. But all access to the school is limited, except first thing in the morning. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Couldn't hear me. Security.
You put the playgrounds mostly on the left side.
South. Sunny.
Exposure.
And there are some mature trees there that we can save.
Sorry, I had one other question going back to the entrance. So you're saying that there isn't a locked door to get into the vestibule, that you get buzzed in past that? It's not a double buzzer system like we currently have?
There will be as many buzzer systems as you want. We think you should buzzer everything
Okay, just,
because there is visibility and there will be a microphone and a camera. So we like to keep people outside. I do want to point out there's an overhang here, so you can be out of the weather. You can be out of the weather as you're waiting to get buzzed in.
And to add, we asked him about adding this, what's it called, school safety glass that's very secure at that particular door, at that area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the school facility, when we talked on Friday with Steve and Pat, and Doug, definitely has all the features of what you want in a secure building. There's a lot of fail-safe areas and locked doors and ways to section off this building, keep the public part, things that we're trying to do now at the high school years after, because it was, you know, these parts were built in a different era. You've built all these things into the plan, which I think is really critical. And just the layout of the building on the parcel for safety in so many ways, I think is truly a brilliant setup in my mind. I think it was well thought out, including all of the traffic patterns and the ways to get in and out of the facility, the best way to use the space on the campus with the part of the campus that is there. And I think the piece of property that hasn't been acquired, but we're in discussions on acquiring in order to make this particular design work, you know, is critical. You've said that it can be designed without it, but it minimizes or diminishes part of the design that is probably the ideal one, and expandable, has the most potential for expansion.
I should admit to you all that the first design we looked at had both K and 1 upstairs, and I wasn't comfortable with that, just from experience. I'm comfortable with first graders. Just a little edgy about K. That would have made the entire building 2 stories. And I wanted to make sure that we had low and then high. So that property became important. The superintendent asked us how much extra land we needed. Pat and I went out to the site, paced it, walked it off, and measured it. And we met with Mr. Campbell, and he seemed amenable. It's a really beautiful piece of land. It's beautiful over there. It's buffered from the Tuttle and Maine, and it looks over on the high school. That's a nice facade of the high school. It sort of glows. The red brick glows in the sunlight. So I think it's, I hope we can build this school, and if we need to reduce it, we will. But our numbers show that we should be able to afford this. This is a pretty reasonable project. It's 70,000 square feet. I just want you to know that. It's 70,000 square feet.
Annika and then Denny.
It's about,
Well, and I was just going to clarify, I think, what you were just speaking to. So in terms of if we didn't have that piece of land, the 2 things I think that I've heard you say are that we would be giving up some of the parking, or at least proximity of parking, and then looking at more of a 2-story all around, having to have at least some kindergarten on the 2nd floor as well as first
that's
grade.
right. That's what I think would happen. And we want to build you the best school we can.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know that it's to that point necessarily, but I did want to ask about the kitchen. So I see that there is kitchen space. Is that just for serving as opposed to preparing? Is that?
Yep, we call it a satellite kitchen. It has its own access from the service area. We have talked to the food service director. We have talked to our consultant, Tom McCardle, who does all of our kitchens, and they've agreed that they need about 500 square feet, and that's what we have. So all of the cooking would occur in Mabel Wilson. Warming and serving would occur here.
Okay. Well, and that's great to hear that there's been that conversation with food service. That
We have.
I feel like that would be workable.
Yep, and he's very affirmative. He says, we'll make it work. Give me 500 square feet, we'll make it work.
Okay. And the round room is the library? Just a different
What's the
layout?
library? Yeah.
Well, a different
Yeah.
concept of
You know,
library.
it's interesting. Since I started designing schools 30 years ago, 35 years ago, they were called libraries, and then they were called media centers, and then they were called computer rooms. And I think this is a new kind of room. This has little alcoves off it with seats, like we usually do for the youngest children in a full elementary school. There's a little storytelling corner. This is a storytelling circle. It also is a great place to bring in a group of 20 adults after school and talk about something. It's really like a living room.
And one of the other things that we had talked about too is just the fact that every one of these classrooms will have a library for kids of this age, where they'll be accessing books every day. And so this creates some other opportunities for this space.
Thank you.
Denny?
Steve, I just wanted to clarify, I think I heard you say that the first RFQ meeting that I attended where we talked through this, that was a design that has been somewhat changed with this, because you had more second story, and this is...
We had more second story.
Just
This
go over
is-
what that change was, Steve.
It's
from-
also because in our experience at other schools with pre-K, we have found that pre-K starts off slow and then fills in. And so we urged the superintendent to consider more pre-K rooms, and he concurred. So this area changed. That expanded. So that's one thing that happened, and we got more exact boundary information. For instance, originally it was sketched that we had this. We don't. It's this. So what we thought were two legs of a triangle ended up being the hypotenuse. So that's what started pushing things around. You know, in design and in site work, the more you learn, the tougher it gets.
And did I hear that the first concept at the RFQ meeting had more second-story classrooms than this one does?
It did. It had some Ks upstairs. We wanted to keep them downstairs.
Hey Steve, how's it going? It's been over 30 years since I've seen you. You're a legend in our house, so it's for the good things like the laundry chute, and you're scapegoated for the size of the bedroom that I grew up in. But it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So thanks for all the work. So I've got a couple of questions. I think you've answered a lot of some of my initial questions. I think you speak very well about the 2 stories and the 1 story. But I am kind of confused as to, is it just a cost thing? And maybe Jeff would know more, but why aren't we just expanding now? Like if we're worried about space, and like when you say, oh, we're just going to do 1 floor, I'm like, why? Why aren't we doing 2 floors and just building pretty much the biggest that we can get right now? Is that a cost thing, Jeff? Is that between...
I don't know if it's a cost thing or if it's just that we're not sure yet if it's absolutely necessary. And the idea that it can be built in relatively inexpensive, what you said, Steve, it'll be inexpensive generally and quick to build if we need it. But we're not sure we need it. And I think part of it is that we're still waiting for final numbers. But even the numbers that we have that we don't think will change that much, those numbers aren't suggesting, at least for the next decade, that we would need those 6 classrooms. There's a lot of flex space built into this design, which I feel comfortable with right now. If the numbers, even if they went up a little bit, we're still going to be, well within capacity. I just don't think it's necessary unless we absolutely need it. I think that was kind of my thinking, at least.
Yeah, and we won't be opening full. We don't want to be opening full. There will be, I forget what percentage that the current projections are saying that we'd be at, but I think there's also a concern that you would build it too big and then, a third of the school wouldn't be used, maybe for a decade or so. So I think that's where we're trying to fine tune. We're waiting for the updated projections with some of the new projects that are coming online in both communities to assure us and the voters that we're sizing it correctly for what we know for at least the next decade, but some opportunities to expand, I think is, what we're looking to do.
Right, because we couldn't, even if we could expand, it wouldn't change the grade levels that we could put in there, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then you talked about speaking with the the kitchen staff. Have you spoken to any teachers or leadership at the lower level as you've kind of designed what type of space we need?
We met with Corey and Carol at length. We met with the Director of Special Education. We now have something that we think works, and now it's time for us, during the month of February, to meet with more staff. We have a staff meeting scheduled, I think, within a week or two, and so we will be tweaking this.
Yeah, okay.
It will be tweaked. For instance, the idea of flex spaces means some of those flex spaces will be spoken for immediately by other than a graded classroom, which we think is good. But as I mentioned, we have a number of small group rooms. Those are both for special study groups, but also for pulling someone out who is being difficult, honestly. We do have a functional life skills room for multi-handicapped. We do have a good OT-PT studio, but we're being very careful about other special ed programs. We want to mainstream as much as we possibly can, but create spaces where you can pull out when you need to.
All right, and then my last question is on the conservative side. So since we don't have this land yet, this obviously looks great, good design. But since we don't have this land yet, and I get anxious for stuff we don't have yet, do you feel confident that if that land were not acquired, you could still design something with enough parking, maybe not 160 spaces, extra spaces that we had, that's safe, that's somewhat expandable without that land? Or are you thinking it's kind of, this is it? I mean, yeah.
I want to urge us to try to appropriate that land. I think it's important for the feeling of not just the building, but the site. I urged SAD 51 when they first talked to me about this, whenever there's adjacent land that can be appropriated, do so. Do so. Be really kind and gentle and acquire it if you can. I think it's far more valuable to the school campus than anything I can think of. I remember way back when we were looking at different sites for the middle school, way back when we first did the classroom for the classroom wing connecting the institute to the high school, and even when we did the PAC, when we were looking for extra land, and we looked all of this. I think would have been very difficult for the neighborhood. But anyway, I hope we can get that land. I really do.
Thank you.
I had one last or another question that came to me as we were talking. So right now there's 4 pre-K classrooms here. It sounds like on your initial design, perhaps there was less pre-K. How many pre-K classrooms do we have currently?
We have one classroom right now because we have AM and PM. So we're hoping that down the road that we would move to a full day model, which would require 2 classrooms.
Yes, because I think, I know one reason why as a board we moved forward with offering pre-K was to give that option for families who need it, and certainly the half day is a barrier for many of the families in trying to cover additional care. I do wonder, though, it seems like the state is signaling more and more that we will have to provide CDS services for 3-year-olds, and Maine is an outlier in states that don't provide those services within the public school system. So do we think that this is enough space?
So Julie Olson, the Director of Special Education, and myself considered what would be a scenario if the state moves forward with this plan that the commissioner has put in front of the legislature, and the legislature adopts that and has students who are 3 who are currently being served. We would try to replicate the program if the board wanted to in the building. with 3-year-olds. Now, I've said for as many times as I've been asked, that I do think we should also consider private providers, and I know there's a lot of people in the community that can also help our students. I think that's part of a huge discussion around where is pre-K, if the state moves forward, what kind of funds are they allocating, how do those funds get dispersed? We have to wait for the legislature. So I don't think there's really an answer. I think the best answer is to make sure that we've got flex space that's built into this design in the event that we need to expand pre-K in this building as a part of a state mandate, or it's part of a board option that they want to look at. But it also can be used for flex space for other learning needs in the building. And so I think we're trying to kind of hug both lines there and cover the bases.
Yeah.
But you're right, and it's definitely more space in the pre-K area than was originally designed. In those blue spaces, I can't see from here, but I think they say flex on them.
No, the
The
peach ones.
peach
Oh,
do.
I'm sorry, the peach
Yeah.
ones,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so there's 6.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that was also sort of my related question then. If those flex spaces, I mean, obviously a flex space isn't necessarily allocated to one grade or another, it's for wherever it's needed in the school, but I guess given that it's in the pre-K grouping, if that would be ideal to go to pre-K, again, I know that also it doesn't necessarily mean it has to, but.
Yeah. Or it could be another area for kindergarten. There's 4 classrooms, for example, that could be a K-pod. I think the good thing about this design is there's a lot of flexible space, and whoever the principal of the school is can look at the design and work with their faculty around how we're best using the space, that we're not designating every room, and we're kind of thinking about kids and where students are best served in this building, in this facility. So I think we're covering the pre-K potential need if the board chose to have pre-K in-house for 3-year-olds who have IEPs. But again, I don't foresee us having ever having universal pre-K, and that this building isn't designed for universal pre-K, whether 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds, just a piece at that point. But I think those are good questions, because the state has definitely signaled in the last 6 weeks that CDS is on its way out. The legislature is very interested in the commissioner's plan right now. So I think
We've
that'll
been
be
working
important.
with that idea up in Skowhegan, as a matter of fact. We have not only pre-K, but we also have infant care with CDS facilities surrounding it. So we know that these spaces would accommodate the earlier childhood ages if they needed to.
Tommy?
Yeah. So with the site as a whole and the improvement plans, including the road as well as the possible turf field, there will be a lot more space on campus that absorbs a lot more sunlight and heat. Do you foresee that to be an issue? I know that the high school and MIW currently don't have air conditioning and could only issues of heat could only get worse in coming years. So do you foresee that to be an issue? And also, if so, what efforts would you say take to remediate that?
We would very much like this school to not use fossil fuels at all, and therefore we would probably be looking at a centralized heat pump system, and we would urge you to have us air condition the school. That will make it a year-round facility. That will make it healthier all the time. And I think it is so important to have classrooms facing sunlight that it's worth cooling them. And so I would say yes, we would hope to cool it. Your middle school is cooled.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first air-conditioned building ever. And the state who funded that school made Cumberland, SAD 51, pay for the air conditioning. And it's still kind of hard to do that anywhere, but most of our schools now are air conditioned fully.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer you?
Yeah, and I guess on the landscape side, do you envision like other solutions, like planting trees, having more vegetation, stuff like that?
Yes, there's, I mean, the site plan right now doesn't show that, but And of course, I've got to get it by Scott, who doesn't like trees, but Scott is here. But yes, I mean, typically trees, we use trees in parking lots and other places along streetscapes, primarily for two reasons. One is to bring the scale down to more of a pedestrian level, and the second is to provide shade to minimize kind of the heat island effect from the parking lots. I mean, there's also other things you can do. You could do kind of light colored pavement to kind of get more reflectivity out of the pavement so that you don't absorb that heat. And so there's other things you can do like that too.
Thank you.
Kim?
So first of all, I just want to say that I love the idea of the circle room. That warmed my heart, and I could see first graders, you know, the I don't know, just like that marker of growing up where you get to go on field trips to the library or even to the Mabel Wilson Library. So thank you for thinking outside the box on that one. I had a question on behalf of some community members. Have you ever considered underground parking as an option? I see the face you're making. It's a reasonable question.
We have done underground parking on quite a few residential projects that we're involved in. And the cost differential between surface parking and underground parking is pretty prohibitive. I think we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of like $20,000 a space to do underground parking.
Okay.
Which, you know, if we're looking at 100 spaces, that's a couple $1 million right there in additional cost. So typically, especially on a school project like this, it's not really kind of very cost effective to do.
That is helpful. Thank you, to have an actual price tag per space. That's extremely helpful. Yeah, sort of projecting if we didn't get the land, that the bonus land, was that an option? But that is a very helpful figure, so thank you. And then my last question regarding expansion. So first of all, the 6 classrooms would all go upstairs, correct? Right. So does that potentially mean, and somebody kind of touched on this a moment ago, that could potentially mean that some kindergarten, like possibly a kindergarten pod, would be upstairs?
That could be, but I do want to show you that the first grade is upstairs, and you do have flex spaces there, but you have far more flex space on the first floor.
Okay.
So if you were to add those 6 classrooms, what we might do is say some non-classroom use would go upstairs. One of the things that the state fire marshal worries about is if you have little kids upstairs and bigger kids upstairs, and there's an emergency exit, that the big kids trample the little kids. So one of the things when you put any young kid upstairs is that's a stairway leading out, and that's a stairway leading out, and that is a stairway from the 2nd floor, which takes everybody down and out to recess. So there are 3 stairways. What they say is if you're going to have younger students up there, you need to find stairways that just they use. But there are no older kids upstairs. So the first grade is fine. I would suggest that if we ever needed to bring some Ks up, we'd put them in these classrooms right near the stairwell as compared to these classrooms, which is a little more central.
That makes sense.
So we would have a way to do that that would be safe. Now, an interesting thing is that the first grade classrooms are smaller in square footage than K classrooms, according to DOE's standards.
Okay.
A K and pre-K are 1,000 square feet. A first grade is 850 square feet. So it's fairly significant. It's because Ks and pre-Ks spend more time on the floor.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, part of me was thinking if we needed to do that, and we return to a looping or multi-age, that would be a good solution if we had to move kindergartners upstairs. But that makes sense too, to keep them.
And I
in that
also,
little
that's
area.
one of the things about scale, and I keep using that word. It's really an important idea in residential work, private residences. It's a really important within a room. The scale makes it feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is going to be a school of little kids. And so I don't know if there'll be a lot of differentiation between Ks and first graders. They're all friends. But the Ks are a little stronger. They can be upstairs and get downstairs. And we only are concerned about that in an emergency.
Right. Okay.
Building will be fully sprinkled, fully alarmed, very secure.
Great. And then one more question about expansion, and I'm sorry because I'm pretty sure you did bring this up at the beginning, but I feel like I missed it. At least I didn't write it down. Based on enrollment projections, if it comes back that second, third, and fourth grade are even more than we thought, what are our options at Mabel Wilson right now if we need to expand? Was that included? I'm so sorry if you.
It wasn't included at the beginning, but I think, Steve, if you wouldn't mind talking to that, that's important also at the middle level. Because obviously this plan, if approved and goes forward, would change the grade configurations of the district.
We are studying Mabel Wilson now with a 2, 3, 4 cohort. There are things we really want to do, like increase the multipurpose rooms so that it's a real gymnasium at Mabel. We would very much like to switch the library and the front office so that they are vice versa. We've already done the design a few years ago, and it just wasn't realized. So I think the quality of space, especially in the old Mabel Wilson, needs attention. But I do want you to know that we have itemized a budget line item for work at Mabel Wilson and the middle school. And the high school, because we're working on the security at the pool end of the building. So we've addressed physical plant needs and put it on a line item that we call miscellaneous other building improvements.
I think it's safe to say, Steve, that all of the things that you were just mentioning are critically important in order to house another building on this campus. There are certain things that have to be looked at in order to free up space, in order to secure space, in order to make this building on campus work for the long term, that it's not just a Band-Aid that we're making. There's other things on campus. Pat talked about the road being moved. Those are things that are critical kind of to the infrastructure and keeping this campus a long-term campus with the land that's been acquired and hopefully the land that can be acquired to make this design realized. I know that the item of money hasn't come up yet, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give us an idea just of the cost, the estimated cost of what this facility that you've designed would be? And then what would be the total cost if you were to do the other pieces to make the campus work for the long term that you have mentioned tonight and talked about at facilities?
We feel
As an
that the
estimate.
building itself will cost slightly over $30 million in construction. We think that there's about $12 to $15 million in other elements on the campus. And then we need to consider project costs, not just construction costs, such as your architect's fees and purchasing land and legal and contingencies. We're carrying 5% contingency both for bidding and for construction. And then for renovations and site work and other fixes on the campus, we increase the contingency because it may happen. We have it broken down. I didn't realize you wanted me to go into budget tonight.
No, and I don't think it needs to be detailed. But is there an estimated high cost?
The project cost maximum we feel will be under $50 million.
Thank you.
I have a question, if we can go back to Mabel Live for a minute and how that's gonna be
Sure.
reconfigured. A lot of community members feel strongly about how 4-5 is working so well together. And there are those who are opposed opposed to this if we end up splitting 4-5 at Mabel Eye. So given that we've talked about we're gonna have a lot of land at Mabel Eye once all those portables leave, is it within the realm of possibility we could look into what if 4-5 stays together at Mabel Eye?
Architecturally, certainly, but that is not my call. I'm not the administrator. I just draw pictures.
So I'll look at you guys, if maybe we can consider, you know, maybe that's a possibility, maybe not. It just seems to be working 4-5 and.
Well, could I ask an architectural question to help answer that? So if there was a wing, for example, I'm putting you totally in the spot right
Yes,
now,
you
Steve.
are.
I'm putting you on the spot, but it just is a ballpark. If you had to add a wing on with 12 rooms at Mabel I. Wilson School, what would you guess a price, or could you come back with one?
Well, $5 million.
Yeah. Plus expanding other common areas in the school in order to accommodate a school of that size.
Yep.
I think we're trying to keep our schools within a reasonable amount. Rebecca's numbers right now show us around 600, a little bit more than 600 as a maximum for grades 2 to 4. The other piece is that in the middle school building that we currently have 4-8, by pulling 2 grades out, there would be additional space that we might really not need to be allocating space that way. But part of that is being done through a space study that I know Steve is working on right now. But my feeling is, and I'll just say this, I think 4th and 5th grade is a great combination. I think this district has made that work for years and years. We have great staff there. We have great administration. They've made the 4-8 model work. But there is no definitive research on grade spans or grade configurations, and many districts configure their grades in many different ways. And I think a 2-4 school is also can be well-led and can be a building that students feel comfortable in. I think it's important that we don't have a school as big as the Wilson School again. That's what I'm worried about the most. I think that is far more detrimental than thinking about grade configurations and spans, is having a school with 800 students in it for elementary kids, grades 2 to 4. If that's the choice.
2 to 5 would be 800.
I mean, sorry, 2 to 5 if it was 800. So if we're doing that, that really offsets any, thinking around what is the appropriate grade span for that school. And many districts do many different things. Look at the state of Maine, grade spans are all over the place. They're not the same. People have pointed to Yarmouth and said they got rid of the 5-8 model. They put the 5th grade back into an elementary setting. But I want to remind people that they did a 5th grade in a middle school setting for 30 years in Yarmouth, 30 years, and they did it well. They had an opportunity, because they were expanding as well, to put the 5th graders back in an elementary setting. But that was because of other logistics that came along. Things can change. And I think it's all about how we approach it, how we present it, and how we make it work. I think the most important thing is, and this goes back to the 2018-19 steering committee, they said keep our schools smaller. They're getting too big. And I think that's the most detrimental part of all that.
Thank you, that helps. It gives me a lot of information. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
So this will not be our last opportunity to have questions about the plans put forward. And I know what's being shown on the screen here today just, showed up in our on our computers just before this. So I want to make sure that the board feels like they have good opportunity to continue to look at what's been presented, to ask questions. This is just I don't know. We've asked you to do a lot over the past month or so since we originally hired you to do the concept design, and I so appreciate the time that you've spent with administrators, with the various committees, and then, there's more to come. The meeting with Mabel I. Wilson is coming up very shortly.
Next Wednesday. Yep,
Next Wednesday. We also have the joint meeting with both the towns next week, where we'll be going over some of the similar information as we continue to understand both what are the draft plans and how we're matching that with the needs of our schools and our communities. As we also talked about, we're waiting for the updated enrollment numbers. And so we have about another 4 to 6 weeks where we'll be working through these drafts, asking questions, further refining, continuing to meet with the towns, understanding sidewalks, other options and opportunities. But in March, we will be asking this to come back to the board where, one, we need to both lay out, okay, what is the final plan we want to put forward for an on-campus model, and then also we have to vote whether to move forward with that or the 80 Gray Road, which we have not completely taken off the table yet, but wanted to understand what the options and opportunities and costs were if we were able to be on campus. So I know that's a lot to take in. This is really the first time this is being brought publicly, and we also want to have opportunities for the community to ask questions. And so we're going to be continuing to lay out different options for input, not only of the board and the school community, but the towns and our community members. And so thank you. I know it took a lot for us to get to this meeting today, and we'll be continuing to work through this until we get to a point where we feel good about what we're asking our community members to vote on. So I want to thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you indeed. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
I appreciate it. And I know I love a good timeline. I wish I had the timeline to put up again, just to remind everyone of where we're at on the calendar between now and what we hope is a June referendum on this. So that's just the higher level plan of what we're looking for this year for the new school project. So we have an exciting evening of presentations. That was the first of two. I am welcoming Kim as the chair of our equity committee to bring forward the draft plan that's been built on since last year. And I know we have other equity committee members here tonight as well. And so I'd like to turn it over to you, Kim.
Okay. First, I have a procedural question. Excuse me. In our packet was a PDF of the equity plan. If I were to add 2 slides just kind of into the introduction, my introduction, is that okay? Or does it have to? Okay.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
No,
I
that
didn't
was
want to
just
violate.
yeah, that was just a sample.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, all right, am I still connected? Room. There's Geiger Room. Da, da, da. Okay. View slideshow. Okay, so here we are. Our newest draft of our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. So what I want to start with, well, what I really want to start with is a thank you to our committee. We have Jackie Hayes here representing especially, well, administration of the high school, but also the equity team at the high school. Jackie was our liaison from our district equity committee to the high school equity committee, which was fantastic to get that feedback. We also had 2 new members, Sarah Allenby and Shauna, I started to say the last name, Shauna Mueller, who are our community representatives. We also had 2 teachers join us this year, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Unfortunately, they were not able to be here tonight. And there was myself and Tim. There were other administrators, including Jeff and Susie. We have Mari Treblecock, who is a principal of 4-5. We had Kate Campbell, of 6-8. We had Kate Campbell, a social worker from 4-5. And am I forgetting anybody? And our student, yes, Jordan Kuehl, thank you, who was also not able to be here tonight. We do have a list of the committee members, but I just wanted to start by thanking everyone. This was a really fantastic process. We all learned a lot. We had some fantastic discussions, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done since September when our committee formed. So to start us off, as you may recall, a draft was presented by Tim and by Jared. At the time, Tim was our community co-chair. Jared was our board co-chair. They had come to the board with a plan that overall looked really good. I was on that committee, and I was excited about what we came up with. We also did ask for feedback from the community. And so over those couple months, when people could email us with their thoughts, there was a Google form where they could fill out their thoughts. These were kind of the 4 areas that I sort of saw the most repetition. There were other comments, but these were the most common. There were concerns about the members, the makeup of the equity committee, some questions about how the committee was formed, who might have been missing from that community, and questions about the diversity, or maybe lack thereof, of the committee. So that came up quite a bit. I'd say that was actually probably the biggest source of feedback. There was also a lot of mention of, similarly, the training and qualifications of the committee members. Were we going through any sort of training? Were people on there who had experience, had the wisdom, the knowledge to bring to the committee? Another one that was really big, and actually it was even more so of a concern for the committee itself, this was probably our biggest challenge, was to determine what our role is. And this, for those of you who were on the board last year, might remember that several of the things that were in the plan were either too prescriptive, or perhaps some of the community felt that they weren't emphatic enough. So the way we kind of thought about that is, are we advisors, are we accountability partners, or are we an authoritative body? And that just sort of, that theme came up quite a lot, particularly, like I said, within the committee itself. And the last piece had to do with overall communication, what sort of feedback we're getting, what sort of, how we're communicating with both the community at large as well as with particular bodies. So lots of some little things, some very specific, some overall, but those were the 4 major categories. And then once we kind of compiled all that feedback and separated it into categories, it was a matter of determining what feedback really does need to be discussed, certainly if it was mentioned enough times, but just because it was feedback, that didn't necessarily mean that we needed to change the plan. So really that discernment of what was something that legitimately we needed to reevaluate. So this is kind of an overview of the changes we've made since that June draft. And if you go to, whether you're on the board or not, on the Equity LSC website, which is a link from the district website, you can see the June plan. So if you wanted to be comparing right now, you can. And I'll try to highlight some things as we go through this. Probably the biggest thing was adding 2 of the teachers to the committee. As I mentioned before, we had an elementary school teacher and we had a high school teacher. Both of them expressed great interest in being part of this process, and their voices were really, really helpful. And in some ways, that is part of what took us probably to do more evaluating than maybe I originally thought. Which is why we're here in February instead of November, but their input was critical, and we're very, very grateful for the conversations that they brought to the table. The guiding principles section in the June draft were 5 or 6 sort of sentences on the very first page of that grid, if you recall, and you'll see the grid in a moment. But we decided to expand the guiding principles section. This was another great conversation where we felt that there wasn't enough of, the grid made it look very stark. And we wanted a little bit more heart in the plan itself. So you could call it the philosophy of why the plan is the way that it is, includes the things that it includes. You could call it a preamble, still could be called guiding principles, but it really just explains, again, the heart behind this, why this is indeed so important to our district. And we feel that that then softens the look of a grid, if that makes any sense. We did simplify the grid to 4 columns instead of 6 to make it a little bit easier to read. We modified the names of 2 of the priority areas. We added descriptions to each of the priority areas to make them a little bit more digestible. And as you'll see as we go through some additions and subtractions to the actual pieces of the plan, we are now referring to the first column as initiatives instead of priorities, because the 4 priority areas, we were already using that name. So here we go. Do you think it's important for me to read this out loud, or can people kind of, I'm happy to read it out loud, but are people able to read that well enough? Okay. So we're just kind of going through a little bit of what District Policy ACA is, and why that is the driver of the plan. This was an important piece. We really felt that we needed to identify in the plan that there is such a broad description of what it means to be a marginalized group, a protected class. And Policy ACA, the first paragraph, those are the classes that have been identified. When we looked into the State of Maine Department of Education, we realized that there's even more. So we really wanted to include that just to show that this is a very broad plan. When we say diversity in our district, we mean that there is a lot of diversity in so many different ways. And part of that is what makes this such a challenging thing to do, but it also makes it so beautiful. And again, that's, you can kind of see the heart behind this, that we are trying to include as many different perspectives as possible. This is a section where we are really identifying that there is a legal component to this. Even without Policy ACA, we still have a legal obligation as a district to make sure that every community member thrives. But in addition to that, we are really wanting to show that we as a district are embracing all of our kids, including the kids that might not be marginalized by definition. We want all of our students to leave the world with empathy and courage. And so I am going to read this last paragraph, because this to me is the part of the plan that honestly I think just kind of describes it the best. By fostering an inclusive district culture and providing differentiated support, we will see that our students reach their academic potential. Moreover, when students move on from MSAD 51, they will be prepared to encounter a world that is broader and more complex, meeting it with the empathy, wisdom, and courage needed to make it a better place. So all of our students will get the attention that they need, the help that they need to feel included, and all of our students will leave this district ready to go out into the world. This helps us understand what the role of the Equity Leadership Steering Committee is, and even though you often see it as Equity LSC, we just made it ELSC to make this just a little bit briefer. But the plan is the plan, and the superintendent and the district leadership team are therefore obligated to follow this plan. Policy ACA says the superintendent is responsible for developing and implementing the plan, and part of that responsibility is tasking us, the committee, to do that. And once that plan has been created and adopted, then that is built in to the definition of the plan that it will be followed. So yes, there are accountability pieces, but we also wanted to show that by definition, this is meant to guide the entire district. And this is a small history of the equity committee that was then formed by the superintendent and the board of directors back in 2019. We felt that this was really helpful because it does remind the community that this was created in the spring of 2019, more than a year before our country really started to reconcile with racism in a new way, in a reinvigorated way. The district was already searching for ways to make our community more equitable because some incidents had in fact happened in this district. So in spring of 2019, this was something that was already in place, and it's taken us several years to get to a plan. And in that time, the work of DEI, the idea of equity has sort of morphed a bit. And so what started as a genuine focus on racial equity is now meant to show the community that we really are including all of those groups that I referenced above. Does that make sense? Okay. So our first area of priority is policies and protocols. And one of the things that I always liked about the initial plan is that it kind of starts small and works its way out. So policies and protocols are almost non-negotiable. Even without this plan, for the most part, we as a district have to adhere to these. And certainly because of policy ACA, we are mandated to have certain things in place to make sure the policy ACA is followed. So this section is, you can think of it as the legal stuff, but this is more internal, the most internal piece of it is how I would describe this. So I won't go through every single element because a lot of them really are the same as the last plan. At one point I realized that really what our committee was doing is, if you're familiar with the Marie Kondo approach to organizing your home, we kind of took everything out, looked at it, how do we feel about this particular piece? Great, let's put it back in. A few things didn't make it back in, a few things were put back in, but we really just wanted to not start from the beginning, but look at everything again individually. So it was quite a process, but really helpful and reminded us why each piece was in there to begin with. So there are certain things that as board members you will certainly be interested in. For one thing, as we looked at our role of accountability partner versus authority versus advisor, there are some things that we as a committee feel that we probably don't have the authority, but we would like to make some recommendations, and some of those do involve policies. So one of the things that we would like to be doing is discuss with the policy committee whether some of our policies can be updated or changed. And we now have what's called necessary steps. Those used to be called action steps, and the only reason we changed them to necessary steps is because that felt a little bit more of a recommendation rather than telling the district leadership team especially what they should be doing. So a necessary step felt more like, this is what we highly recommend. And I am excited that one of the things that we have landed on, you'll see kind of in the middle under necessary steps, is an equity audit. That is something that we are recommending strongly be put in next year's budget. And we're in communication with our equity consultant, Lawrence Alexander, as well as some schools in the area who have done equity audits. And that will help us to, when we come back next year, to understand whether this plan needs to be adopted at all. District administration reporting. This is a key area. Obviously, we need the data so that we know what we're dealing with. This is pretty much the same as last year's. Human resources has been added as an area that we would like to explore how we can achieve and retain a more diverse staff, recognizing that we live in Cumberland, North Yarmouth, Maine. Behavioral intervention. We moved this up to policies and protocols because for the most part it is, again, more of the most internal piece. And we want to make sure that this was something that our teachers reported back to us, that they want to make sure that they have the tools they need when an incident arises, as well as really digging into how are our behavioral supports and are any groups being treated inequitably as we look at how students are disciplined. And finally, the plan review. Again, if we have an audit that comes back with interesting data that shows us that this plan might need to be adapted, that's going to really help us. But either way, there's always new information, there's always new things to learn. And so that is indeed part of the plan, is to review and update as needed. Academics and programming. The first step is still a little tentative because we do not yet have our portrait of a graduate, might be called profile of a learner, but in consultation with Lawrence, that is a really big piece to this because it does speak to what we want students to experience while they're here and what we want them to be prepared for when they leave. And so once that has been finalized, then the plan needs to support that to make sure that there is not a single barrier to any child achieving the portrait of a graduate. Our curriculum, if you notice under resources and notes, by the way, there are a lot of places where there are links. So sometimes we got a little ahead of ourselves and we were listing way too many things. So the list of 2023-24 social and emotional learning opportunities by school, if you were to go into that, you would see that in each of the 4 schools, there are curriculum pieces such as the Wax Museum is always one that we love to talk about, that every child experiences the Wax Museum curriculum where they can learn about anyone else, and really is just a fantastic way to begin that, to broaden their worldview. So in addition to those built-in to the classroom pieces, there are also things that are built into the school day. So they are not extracurricular in the sense that a child cannot sign up for them. They're built into the school day. The classes go to them, but they are above and beyond what we might call academics. So I would encourage you to look through that because it's a really fantastic list of things that we are already doing in the classrooms at all 4 schools. Our staff training, this was another piece that, again, our teachers really helped us to understand what they feel their needs are. Their feedback was really, really important on this. So it is important to include not only the behavioral piece in staff training, but also simply how to teach sensitive matters. And that is something that we are hoping that as a committee we can be more, play maybe a little bit more of an advisory role in that, to make sure that our staff training aligns with the content that comes up in the classroom, as well as perhaps unexpected incidents. Education materials, this again was pretty much in the original plan, but we really wanted to have it as its own separate line, that books and resources are in the classrooms and the libraries pursuant to policy IJJ that have a broad representation of diverse populations. And what we would like to do is to invite the librarians to come and talk with us about their process. We've heard a lot the last 6 months about policy IJJ, but we would like very much to sit down with our librarians and get an understanding of the books that are in our libraries. This section, we changed the name. This was formerly called Student Leadership and Participation. And as you notice, that circle I was talking about is getting a little bit larger. We had the internal policies, we had the classroom piece, and now we're getting to a bigger sense of who we are as a district. And that speaks to, again, those same social and emotional learning opportunities. These are the ones that perhaps are places where kids could do in addition to their school day. We want to make sure that there are plenty of experiences where kids can connect with kids who are like them and with kids who maybe have one thing in common with them. So perhaps an identity group opportunity, but also kids who like Dungeons and Dragons and will come from all different backgrounds. So we want to make sure that those opportunities beyond academics are really vast. And again, we have a lot of really great opportunities already. Student feedback was another piece that in the feedback from the community that we got, we would like to hear more from more students, but we also want to do it in a way where the students feel comfortable. So we are exploring with Lawrence ways of having sort of like focus groups, but there would be broad representation within the focus group unless a group of students wanted to come to Lawrence and meet with him to talk about their experiences. We don't want any student to feel uncomfortable by being called to us to come and talk to us. So there was a lot of discussion on that, and I feel really good about how we've kind of landed on different ways to hear from the students. Student leadership, this was something that we had in the last plan that we realized our overreach might be a little strong on this one, but the idea is that kids who are already emerging as leaders, particularly freshmen and sophomores in the high school, would have an opportunity to have their own, not really a focus group, this would be more of a training group with Lawrence, where he would like to see teachers and administrators identify students who just seem to have influence by their passions, by their activities, get them all together to talk about how they can be upstanders in the community. So we took out the word upstanders because that is a very broad phase and we didn't want to connect it to a particular curriculum, but that is the easiest way to describe how Lawrence would be training them, was to be upstanders. And if anybody has any questions on that, obviously, any questions at all, you're going to have a chance to ask. And finally, student safety, nothing new here, although we did break it up into the idea of physical safety as well as our mental health of our students. And so we would love to participate a little bit with both the safety and the wellness committees just to see how those policies are coming together and if there's anything that we can be adding to that. And finally is community engagement. This was called family and community engagement, and we just decided to keep it at community because, again, we are broadening significantly at this point. We are looking at opportunities for continuous learning, particularly in areas that are just really misunderstood right now. That is something that is in the future. I don't have a resource for it yet, but it is something that the Equity Committee wanted to put in the plan so that we are actively pursuing ways that we can reach out to the community. Obviously, with communication within the district is critical. We've had a lot of conversations about how to handle communications about incidents that have to do with policy ACA. Jeff's plan for its incident communication, now I just forgot what it's called, but that is something that obviously we need to make sure that the community has the information that they need and that they understand sometimes they don't need. But in addition to that, the ELSC website needs to be updated, so that will be something we will be doing, and working hopefully with the Community Engagement Committee to help us understand how we can better reach out. And finally, this is a new, very, very new possible initiative. So please know that nothing has been decided, but we've been approached by both the towns of Cumberland and North Yarmouth, the leadership of those two towns, to create a collaborative, possibly statement, possibly task force, so that all three of us can work together to really advance DEI in our two communities collaboratively. And so it just made sense for all three leadership teams to meet together. So that is a very ongoing, very preliminary process, but we like the idea of putting it in the plan just to show that there are more opportunities out there in our community. And there's the list of people. So if I forgot anyone, it looks like I got everyone. There is our committee. Thank you again. And any questions, this link continues to be on the website. It takes you directly to an email. Anyone can contact us with any questions or concerns. There you go. Tim, anything you want to add?
I do, but I want to invite also our other committee members here who came, if they had anything to add first.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. You did a great job. I'm Sarah Allenby. I'm one of the community representatives. I just wanted to call out the change that we made to, in the grid, the column that we're calling outcome and sort of what that means. I can't remember in the previous draft what that column was called, but we sort of reworked the structure of that whole column to look at what the, there's the initiative, and then if that initiative is met, or is, if we do the best job we can with that initiative, what would the outcome, like the perfect end point be? And it would be that outcome. So just when you're looking at it.
Yeah, it was
just wanted to make
objective
sure.
last time. And it was
Oh,
objective
objective,
last
yes.
time, which is, he seemed a little softer than like, this is what it looks like, the
Right.
outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of like written definitively, but it's like the ideal outcome. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. I forgot to say that.
And thank you, Kim. I think that was a really great summary of the changes, and I really appreciate your leadership this year. It's been like 2 years or a year and a half to get to this point, and I'm very happy with where we're at. I think it's a very comprehensive plan. We tried to shorten it based off some of your feedback last year, and every time we did, and it is shorter, but every time we did it, it just felt, came off as performative, like a checklist, without any real substance to it, and none of us on the committee felt good about it. And I think this is something we feel proud of. There's no perfect plan. Each member made compromises to what their personal ideal plan. But I think we also all got wins, and there's a little bit of each of us in this. And then I think for the public, I also want to make clear, and Kim read that paragraph, which I think is right on point too, that this is not just a social emotional tool or guidance or framework. This is very much focused on academics and making sure every student receives the support, no matter what their privileges are or what their lack of privileges are. And I feel really good about if we carry out this plan, which I know that we'll stumble, that each kid will get what they need, and there's a balance and check for that. So I'm very proud to be showing this and sharing this, and I'm excited for your feedback too, because as we've built in here, we can make it better, and we will continue to make it better, and there's space to continue to make it better. We're gonna stumble, and there's a lot in here, but I'm excited about it regardless. It's a good starting point, and I'm proud of it. Yeah.
So obviously we want to give other members a chance to weigh in and ask questions, but can you remind me, Kim, are we looking to vote on this? What are the next steps? I know we're shared this draft that you provide this wonderful overview of, and then what are we looking to for next steps?
Thank you for reminding me to say that. Yes, I think that for us as a board to vote on it shows that collectively we are supporting it. And by us as a board supporting it, we can then socialize it out into the community, because it is hard to grasp. And it took us 6, 7 2-hour-long conversations each to even arrive to this point. So there's a lot of just talking to people about what it is. So if we as a board are able to vote on it, then Jeff and the district leadership team are able to proceed with what they're pretty much already doing, but also looking at ways to, if there's anything new that needs to happen to support the plan. I do also want to take a moment before I fully answer the question. The only thing in the plan that is officially asking for more money in the budget is the equity audit. Yes, there is the potential for some programming, some speakers, things like that. But for the most part, this does not ask for budgetary additions, for more risk management or another position to be hired. This is working within what we have already, leveraging what we already have. So in that sense, when we're voting on this as a board, hopefully no one feels like they're being asked to introduce something really brand new that could be problematic in the future.
And just to add in, Kim, unless this change scheduled for a vote by the board on March 4th.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, our next meeting.
Month.
Yeah.
Well, Kim, I just want to say thank you to the committee work. You know, I feel like the previous plan, one of my struggles with it is that it felt like there wasn't really the opportunity for much work to be done by the committee, in the sense that there were so many people coming to give presentations at each of the committee meetings that it really made it hard to find space to actually take meaningful steps to implement these ideas throughout the district. So I really appreciate, you know, how it's outlined, how the work will be divided between the committee, and the different sort of questions to help guide the committee and the district as we move forward to implement these various initiatives. It is certainly a long time coming, for sure, but I'm glad that we're here.
And I just wanted to add, thank you for that, that I don't want to speak for Tim, but I know that having been on the committee last year, a lot of those invitations were our way of trying to get the data that we might need. And we realized it just wasn't translating well when you put it in the grid. So in that sense, I think it was really important that that was a starting place. And I really appreciated why it was in the plan last year. And just the more we looked at it, we realized that it was, as you said, it just wasn't translating into the plan. And so there's still going to be plenty of opportunities to invite people in, but rather than making that an action step, we're just hopefully identifying places that's already built in, so it doesn't look like an additional step, if that makes sense. But yeah, Tim, is there anything you want to add about that?
No, I mean, I think a lot of that is also, we got feedback of, like, these are the things that need to be done, and then also, like, you can't do that. Like, you need to you need to work, and it, like, why don't you speak with the, you know, academic support specialist or the librarian? And so a lot of it's also like, hey, our first step should be having conversations to figure out where we're at. But I think where we shortened that last year of just like, we're going to invite them rather than like, what's the outcome of that invite? What would the next steps be? And I think to Ann's point, I think we kind of elaborated on that a little bit. And there might be room for improvement with that, but yeah, it's just the starting point to figure out where we're at and not make assumptions of where we think we're at.
I think for this evening.
Keep going down the line.
Oh, yeah. I just want to say thank you all for the presentation, for the process. That was definitely helpful to hear. And I really appreciate also how you outlined that conversation around what is the role of the committee, and just seeing some of the changes in language that I noticed, at least at first glance through the plan. And I'll look forward to having a little bit more time to look through it before we actually vote on it. But, you know, certainly look forward to it being something that I collaborate with the committee on as a board member and support. So thank you. Appreciate it.
So I have two things. One, did you talk explicitly about logic models as you're going through this process?
Logic models?
Because you've created a logic model.
Yes, yes. If you think that I create a logic model, then that's exactly what I do.
So a logic model is a tool that's used in program evaluation where you have an initiative and action steps that are listed here that are eventually going to lead to an outcome. One thing that's not included here that you'd find in a logic model is outputs, which would tell you, it's quantitative or qualitative data that would tell you whether you've achieved the outcome that you're intending to achieve. And I don't think that needs to be in the plan because those things are going to change as you're getting into this. But it might be helpful as this work is being approached. How do you know whether you've achieved the outcome that you want to achieve? What does that look like? And then to formalize that in some way, I think would be helpful. So, and nice job creating one of these things totally accidentally. I'm impressed. The second thing is this is the same observation that I had back in June. This is a lot of work, and you're saying also that the only additional resource request here is for the equity audit. So, and I appreciate you simplifying the plan. But I also appreciated having who's responsible for what in the initial plan. And so there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be asked to do this work without additional resources. So what is that going to look like for them? How are they going to get additional capacity to do this work? And I think you just need to be thoughtful about that before we finalize this plan.
That's great to see.
And thank you. This is a lot of work. I'm really impressed.
Anyone?
I'll just say a big thank you and kudos to you all for a tremendous amount of work that went into this. It's really clear and nicely laid out, which I think is fantastic just because you're trying to communicate something, get buy-in, and I think that this does a really nice job. I like the concentric circles of sort of the district moving out through the community, and I think that will be very powerful in the future. So hats off to you for including all of that.
Not to put you guys on the spot, but we would love student input too.
I think that one thing that I definitely felt with the first equity plan is it just feels so big, and it feels like how do you implement this like very specifically with each step and with each outcome that you desire. And I think that breaking it down was really helpful, and also showing where it's already being done and providing examples like that is really great. While also really setting forth like really productive ways that you could accomplish this. I remember last year with the presentation, I felt like it was just like a lot coming at me, but this one felt definitely more manageable.
I'd agree with Tommy. I feel like with the original plan, I know that like some students who were looking at it felt like it would be hard to hold the school like accountable to it in a sense. Like there's no way to know or to like, it's kind of like you can say that you're doing something, but the students felt like it would be easy for it to be kind of like minimal effort to put in, and then this feels like this plan would actually hold the school accountable to it because there's like such specific examples and like things that need to happen. So I feel like this would definitely have a positive student feel.
Yeah, we want to hear from students when they, whether it's directly or through you guys.
And on that, I know that the student government is interested in reviewing this, the policy committee with the student government. So, and we would love to actually have a member of the equity committee come and talk with them as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
You know, as we sit here and we talk about the size of it, and that feedback, as I said, we tried to shorten it, and this, you know, and when we shortened it to a certain level, it's like, this isn't enough. I think one of the things that we should think about as a committee is a lot of the outcomes are kind of aspirational. Like, we have no thought of that these necessary steps are going to lead directly to these outcomes. I think they're a first step, right? Like, if we were to do a year, a timeline of next year, this is the SY25 year of next steps. And then we're building towards that outcome, because those outcomes feel very big. They feel ginormous if you got to this point. And so some of the next steps are, if you read them, like, you could do it in a couple of meetings, or they could be combined. They don't all happen like we talked about last year. So I don't know if I think on paper it looks a lot bigger than the necessary steps than it actually might be. But I do think that we should continue to consider that. And I think that's one of the places where we'll stumble, where we'll be like, yeah, that was not realistic for us to get done in a year. But I do think that we should probably be clearer of, like, do these, to Tom's point about the logic model, will these next necessary steps lead to the outcome? Because I think it's going to take multiple steps and years to get to some of these outcomes that we're projecting. We should be clearer about that. So, yeah.
I think if we were to sum up the ultimate ideal outcome, it would be that an equity leadership steering committee would not be necessary at all. So, yeah, I would love to see that first line under policies and protocols be obsolete, because we don't need one. But yeah, it's things to move forward to constantly.
And I really love the idea of selecting students and having that as, like, it's really like putting a presence in the school. And I think that's a great idea.
Right. And hopefully that could also be expanded to the middle school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and, you know, the elementary school would love to see more action there as well. So, but yeah, we'll start with the high school, see how it goes.
I would just add thank you. This is a lot of work. It's amazing. Took a long time, a lot of boards. But in particular, the part about adding the students, I like, because when you talk about the outcomes and they're aspirational, I totally agree with you. And how do you measure them? Well, who's going to know better than the students? So I think that's great that they're going to be an integral part of it.
Just from my perspective, a couple things I'd like to say. First, it was great being part of this process, been part of the equity process since we started, but I feel like we're finally at a plan that I think that we can move forward with. Some of the key things that I have picked up on, and just want to, again, thank every member of this committee for hours and hours and hours and hours of work, but just defining some things. We talk about equity a lot, and a lot of people have make assumptions one way or the other about what exactly is it. And I think this plan kind of just starts right out with some definition, kind of putting, taking the abstract and just making it concrete, so that it's not just guesswork or question marks or what are you talking about, or equity that, you know, is in some other part of the world. No, what does it mean right here in Cumberland, North Yarmouth? Another piece is the student conversation. I just really, I'm glad that that's in there. It's something we've talked about on and off over the last few years as we've talked about equity, but we've got to have conversations with students directly, and whether it's an external person coming in and conducting those, whether it's internal conversations, but asking students directly in person, what do you think about equity and what does it mean? Let's talk about it as an educational piece. The staff training piece, I think our teachers added a lot of information, like Kim said, about what we need to be thinking about with staff training. in making that a substantive part of this plan. The equity audit, I think, is a critical component of that. It's a way of actually having people that are not here come in who do this for a living, and just look at everything and just say, hey, here's some recommendations about the way you could be doing things differently, and then affirming things that we're already doing. And then finally, I think this plan is a continuum. It's not just, oh, we're done, let's move on. It's constantly continuing. And I think that's the best kind of plan, and it puts that in motion. So there's a lot of pieces of this plan that I think are amazing, but those are some kind of big ones that always stood out to me.
So I have a couple additional questions, comments maybe. So the equity audit, so are we saying that if we do vote on this, to approve this as a board, that we're also wanting to approve a budget for an equity audit, and do we have a cost for that?
So Susie Robbins and I, we looked into it, and I think it's $15,000 that we have put into the proposed budget. Of course, you can approve this plan, and then the budget doesn't include that item, so it's an unfunded item, which is the board's purview to put that forward. So you can still approve the plan with the aspiration of doing that. It just may not be next year. It may be the year after, if it's funded.
But we could we, when we vote next month, could we also as a board like affirm our commitment to that?
Yep. And ultimately it's the board's decision what budget you put out anyway.
Okay.
So whether it has that in there or not, or you have changing conditions.
Okay.
But it's certainly the board's. So by voting for the equity plan, you can affirm that, but you also are not, stuck to that because of the budget process.
Okay.
The budget process supersedes that.
Okay.
So Leanne, if it makes any difference, like there's we could do an external audit, or we could do an internal one. I think the external would be better, right? But I think to Tom's point, so we could get some kind of baseline of metrics of what we're trying to get to and what our goals are, so we could have those. I think we just know that we needed some kind of audit and overview, and I think it's probably better served to have it external, but we could do it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and yes, and Tom, you made some really good points, and I guess in my mind, some of the outcome of having the equity audit would provide some of those items that you're referring to that we sort of might need to add in here into the future. So I was excited about that, and also the point that we are asking people to do more. We may not say it's a budget item, but time and resources certainly are budget items, and so just to be able to consider that we're not just adding on to what we're asking people to do, but I'm really excited and honored to be part of a board who gets to vote on this next month, so thank you, and to have the opportunity to help socialize it, because I love how that was described, so thank you for bringing that forward. And just one more comment, you mentioned the Portrait of a Graduate, Profile of a Learner. Yes, that is a separate group. Annika and I are the board representatives as part of that committee with Lawrence and a number of other administrators and staff and teachers. So that I'm excited to have that work underway. And we'll be bringing that to the board as well, just the update on that once we get there. So again, thank you.
You're welcome. There's one more thing I'd like to add, if that's okay. This is tangent to the plan. This speaks more to what is already happening. At our last meeting, we had a nice discussion about what differentiated support means, and I kind of skipped over that, or read it, but no one asked about it. And we tried to decide whether we should keep that term in, which is very much in the school academic community, but essentially what it means is personalized support, based on what a student needs. And some of us parents were having a conversation, and I'll admit it, I was the one who brought it up, that sounded really lofty, like, well, there's no way that teachers personalize every single student. They've got a class of 25 students, and does that mean that really, you know, one kid can have this assignment and the other kid could have maybe this, but a little bit adapted. And we were like, yeah, we don't want to say personalized because that's not what's happening. And then we picked up on the communication, silent communication going on between the administrators and staff. They were like, yeah, that is what we do. So I just want to take this moment and shout out to our teachers, because that led to just this sort of aha moment for me that this is happening already, where teachers are doing this. They are looking at every single student in their classroom and determining what every single student needs. And this child might need 5 minutes more. This child might need, you know, an extra version of it. I mean, it's unbelievable what our teachers are doing. So I say that as a thank you, and to those of us who are not in the classroom watching what's happening or have had a conversation with a teacher lately, please know that that is literally what is happening in our classrooms, and it's amazing. That's what I wanted.
That was a nice ad. Thank you. Okay. I think that concludes the presentation portion. Still early, right? And thank you. All right, so we're going to move to items for action. We have a second read. I would like to ask for a motion to approve policy IKF, graduation requirements, as presented.
I would like to make the motion to approve policy IKF, graduation requirements as presented.
Thank you, Anne. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Great. Thanks, Annika. Thanks, Annika. Do you want to remind everyone, Anne? Thank you.
Yeah, just, and for those who may be watching at home, the changes to this policy were made to better outline the expectations for graduation ceremonies for our students, and then also to reflect what is needed to support our students with IEPs and extended study students.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments? All right. I'd like to move to vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, Anne. Okay, so we have another item for action. It is to authorize the superintendent to execute an extension of employment contracts for administrators. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Denny. Second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Would you like to describe what this item is in more detail?
This is an annual request for authorization of the board to extend the contracts of school administrators and district office level administrators, and most of that is governed by state statute. And we have, so all of your building administrators are in the memo that I put in the board packet, along with district administrators, which are included on a contract basis. You'll notice that administrative and supervisory positions for technology, facilities, food service, and transportation are not on this list because they're on a letter of agreement, which is annual and doesn't require board action. That's handled through the superintendent's office, so directly. So that is your list, and it is in your board packet.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. So the asterisk on there,
Yes.
can you explain that?
So we have 4 administrators, but state law delineates, as they do with teachers, 2 years, the first 2 years in a respective role, and then anything after that. Along with teachers, it's the same thing with principals and assistant principals. So the asterisks in your memo denote 4 administrators who are completing their first 2 years in their role, and will be moving to, it's not called continuing contract, but basically it's their contract roles every year. And that is a different evaluation cycle that we use. So I evaluate new administrators to the role, or their supervisor does, annually for the first 2 years. And then after that, it's every 3 years per our leadership plan, leadership appraisal plan. And the leadership appraisal plan is part of our comprehensive evaluation process that we have for teachers and principals and school leaders in our district.
So am I reading it right that those 4 administrators, we have 4 who are within their first 2 years? They're
Yes.
finishing the first 2 years, so they will be evaluated next year.
They'll be evaluated still at the end of this year, and then they go into a 3-year cycle.
Got it, okay, because they finished the.
Yeah, they'll be completing their 2nd year this year. So basically, I'm just asking for authorization to extend their contract going into a 3rd year.
Great. Can I call for a vote? All in favor? Great. Unanimous. Thank you. And thank you. All right. So we are going to move. We had a 3rd item for action that we'd like to move to the end after we go back into executive session. Is there something else I need to do to officially move that?
I would probably, at this point, if there's consensus with the board, you don't have to do anything officially. At this point, you can just skip that.
I can just skip it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So on to superintendent's report.
All right.
You're up.
All right, tonight I do have a really lengthy report for you. No, I'm going to go really quick, and I'm sorry it was. I'm going to talk really fast. I know we're getting late. Okay, superintendent's report, February 5th. Mabel I. Wilson School. We just have had a lot. We haven't had a meeting, but 2nd graders. Here's some things. I'll skip over a couple of things, I'm sure. But 2nd graders were building. Actually, had a chance to see their projects. They were building gingerbread. Schools, basically, the middle school and Mabel I. Wilson School, they were looking at community and what's in a community. Schools are in a community, and then they built their own replicas of that. Younger students, kindergarten and 1st grade, have been learning about landscape painting. And this will be in the newsletter and on our website. Students in grades 2 and 3 have been very much artists lately, completing expressive self-portraits. Also at Mabel I. Wilson School, it's starting to look a little bit like winter. These were taken maybe a week ago. At 4-5, same thing, and we want to thank the PTO again for funding sleds for our elementary students to do some sliding and enjoy the winter weather. In science class at 4-5, 5th graders have been learning about the movement of matter. Also in 4th and 5th, 5th graders have been learning about ecosystems and food chains. Also at 4th and 5th, the Civil Rights Club has learned about the Lunar New Year, which is on February 9th, which is this week, Friday. Students learned about the origin symbols and traditions in the Chinese zodiac, made traditional good luck symbols to hang on their door to bring prosperity in the new year. At 6-8, before the winter break, this was a few weeks ago, library volunteers delivered $250 worth of book donations to the food pantry, and they generated $2,800 for the middle school. So congratulations to the students for doing that. In 8th grade, students were involved in the Rube Goldberg Science Project. At the high school, December High School Students of the Month, Noah Allen, Violette Morgan, V. Walsh, and Lucy Noonan. Also at the high school, we have 2 French visitors from the Amori precinct, and we have a teacher that is visiting as part of an exchange, and we have a student who is visiting from France for several weeks. At the high school, we had 11 students who participated in the Poetry Out Loud contest. It was a full room during the school day, and we had many students who did, and I'm always impressed by this event. The students stand up twice during this event and recite a poem of their choice, And it's just, when you're doing that in front of hundreds of people, I know it can be nerve-wracking. And then to remember your lines, and then to use intonation and expression, and to be looking where you're supposed to be looking, and keep all that together, it's just amazing. Every year I'm just impressed by the students. So hats off to all the students. Also at the high school, featured in the Paths newsletter this month, or actually this quarter, Eden Saylor is the Path student of the quarter. She's the only Greeley student we have this month, and she is in the carpentry program. In the Rangers Rock part of my report, Greeley graduate Delaney Nolan won a silver and a bronze medal as a sprinter representing the U.S. at the Parapan American Games in Chile. Her next goal is the 2024 Paris Paralympics. Congratulations. And also the Greeley girls basketball team hosted an ice cream social and poster signing party for all of their young fans, and I know they have many. Also in Rangers Rock, and I'm not going to read all of these great names, but we had 31 singers who represented the high school at the District 2 Honors Choral Festival in January. Also Rangers Rock, January 18th, high school senior Charlie Moore performed with the Oshima brothers at the Art Center. And I did not have a chance to attend that, but I heard it was very well done. Also Rangers Rock, the Rangers represented the high school at the Model United Nations Conference at Boston University. And in the superintendent's notebook, I am not going to go through the entire progress report, but just note that there is a mid-year progress update. I'll be giving another update at the end of the school year, and just to get right to the point. This is what the progress report looks like. These are all the items that were presented at the beginning of the year around the strategic priorities for the year, and this progress report has been updated just a bit to show you the approximate completion of all of these items. Again, we're focusing on items that are in all 4 of the strategic plan areas, including wellness, early childhood education, which is mostly the new school project, college and career, which is focused on academics and writing, math articulation across the curriculum, 21st century, the profile of a learner that is being worked on, the equity plan, obviously, is a big portion of that. So those are all items that are in progress, as you can see, in most cases, midway through the school year. Another item just want to bring everyone's attention to is that this is another series that will be in the newsletter intermittently for the next few weeks on the science of reading. Science of reading is a new approach that the district has been involved in for really 3 or 4 years, and looking at the research around literacy and how students learn with reading. But so this is a series that hopefully parents can read and find out more about this approach. In another area I just want to call your attention to is the annual report data comparison chart. I want to thank Melissa Porter in my office for doing a lot of work on this. Nicole Barnes, who's our Power School specialist, also contributed, as well as some other folks in the district, just kind of putting the data in perspective for the last 10 years or so, and comparing a lot of different categories. I added some categories today that we have not put the data in, but we will. But just trying to include as much data that gives a picture of what the district's data, I have no idea what that was, but I think we just locked out. What the district's data is, and you can go back over the last decade and then look at the data points and how they compare. So the next step we'd like to do, and I talked to Melissa today about it, is start graphing some of this data so that there's a more visual representation. So you can look at something and then kind of look how we've done over the last decade with that. So that's the next step that we'll be looking at. But this will be posted this week on our annual report page if it hasn't been already.
Jeff, will Power School not do that? I mean, I know Power School can do that for you, but does our Power School instance not graph, let's say, like average daily attendance for these last few years and all that?
No, it's not something that it will do. We have to do it manually ourselves. We create those graphs. I don't believe we have that feature that I know of. But I will ask that question.
I can help you with that if you want. But that's
It
like a
might be
pretty
something that we
simple add-on. That would save Melissa probably a lot of time. But
she likes making graphs, so does a really good job with it. But we've added some things too that weren't in the annual report this year. But we'd like to just make sure that we're keeping on top of things like parent attendance at conferences, parent attendance at open houses, all the stakeholder survey satisfaction data, things like that we've added. There's other items on here that were not on the original annual report that you'll find on this. So hopefully you find it fascinating. And if you find items that we're missing or you think of, we're trying to compare this data as much as we can so that people have a good picture of what the district's data points look like.
Yeah, this is really helpful, and it's especially helpful, I think, to start being able to see some of the trends, especially, pre-COVID, all in one place. So thank you for getting this pulled together. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think it's been really interesting to look at the data. Where there's places that it says no data, there are really, a lot of the assessment data during the COVID 2 years was suppressed, or it was not. We didn't even have students taking assessments at one point. So there's different reasons why there's no data in some of the areas that you'll look at. But if you have any questions, just let me know.
Is that it?
No, I think I have a couple more slides.
Okay.
Sorry. Told you it was a long report. Board goes to school. I know we've had some board members attend the first two Board Goes Back to School events at the middle school and at the high school. And we have two more coming up, Wilson School and Middle School 4 or 5. But last week at one of the Going Back to School events, we had board members visiting science classes, for example, at 6-8, and PE class at 6-8 as well. And there's some photos here. And finally, Leanne, you had mentioned the timeline for the school project. I know you can't really see that, it's too small right here. But there is a timeline, and we'll be putting this timeline out. And some of it is dependent upon the board's approval of different steps along the timeline, but you can see that the project that was presented tonight by Steve Blatt, is scheduled for a board vote on March 18th. Again, these can be adjusted as Leanne and I keep talking about different steps that need to be taken. But just going to give you the scope of the project and what's ahead from here. So that's the end of the report.
Thank you. I don't mean to rush you, but thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? Great, thank you. We'll move on to committee reports and kick off with our students.
Okay, so since our last meeting, we did midterms. We were supposed to have our meeting the Tuesday, right, on the first day of midterms. So that was kind of a fortunate ending. But that went well. And then right now, the high school is kind of in the middle of selecting courses for next year. And with that, Tommy and I and a couple other full IB students talked to the 9th and 10th graders during advisory last week about full IB. And there's an IB info night tomorrow if anyone wants to go to that. But I know a couple students who are considering it, and I'm so excited. So, and then this Thursday, we have an extended advisory, and for 11th and 12th graders in the GCA, we have a guest speaker coming to talk about mental health issues, and I think that was part of the Kyle Cares Club work, that the group that came to speak last board meeting. So I don't know much about that because it hasn't happened yet, but I will be sure to report. my next student report.
Yes. And then for the seniors, now that we are firmly in second semester, following midterms, it's starting to feel weird. We're getting our weekly emails, and we only have 17 weeks left until graduation. But before graduation, a lot of people are going to need to take exams, whether it be AP and IB, and the exam revision season is starting. There were a lot of resources sent out about study Zooms for studying for exams, so that's exciting. Also, the senior class gift, there's a lot of working behind the scenes on the senior class gift as well as Spirit Week in planning that. That will be a week in March. And Spirit Week's always a really fun week where the whole school really gets to come together. Yeah, the IB Info Night, I'm super excited for that tomorrow, as well as sports seasons are wrapping up and coming to a close of the regular seasons. There has been the senior night for boys basketball last Friday, and the senior night for girls basketball is coming up this week. And all the other sports also are having their end of season playoffs begin shortly. And the swim team has our regional meet on Friday. And then looking forward to March, one thing that is being done as part of the IB annual theme that was presented to us earlier, a few months ago, which is food for thought, is that there will be an Oxfam hunger banquet, which is an opportunity for people to really feel the disparities between income and hunger throughout the world, and it's kind of an experience where you get given a role at the beginning of the dinner, and then you are given dinner based on what that role is, whether it's the bottom 50% of income worldwide, middle 30, or top 20, and that will be happening March 14th, Thursday, March 14th at 6 o'clock at West Custigo Hall. And if you have questions about tickets, you can email me or Madame McDonald.
Great, thank you. I saw that come out in the newsletter today, and I added that. That looks like a great event. Thank you. Okay, next up, community engagement. Megan.
Community Engagement Committee has been busy continuing to work on messaging about a new school, and the FAQs are just about ready to roll. Will be posted on the board's website when they're ready. We've been talking about some in-person events that the entire committee is very much looking forward to. And so pending the vote on March 18th about which direction we go in, we will then launch into some in-person modes to be available to the public to both answer questions and solicit feedback on the direction that we're going. We would like to begin in-person events at the end of March, March 20th, being the first of 2 nights of parent-teacher conferences, and then roll right into Footloose, which is the high school's musical. Other in-person events include Little League kickoff and the parade, spring sports, kindergarten orientation, incoming freshman info nights, and hopefully on-site, whether it's 80 Gray or here, for in-person, like walk the property events. So we're getting ready, and we'll go whichever direction the board says in late March.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Yes, it's helpful. We still have the timeline up to remind us, right? Thank you. Finance, Tom?
Finance, we met a couple of weeks ago, and Jeff and Scott walked us through the fiscal 25 priorities to really get our budget cycle going. We are meeting again this Friday, and again next Wednesday, where we will continue to talk about the budget. And Scott will be giving a year-to-date review of our fiscal 24 expenses relative to the budget.
Great, thank you. And policy.
So we had an update from you or Jeff regarding the first quarter results, and it was going to be projected to be a kind of a tight year for the balance of the year. And I was wondering whether when you'll get a look at the second quarter, and do you feel that we're on track vis-a-vis the budget?
So I'll start this off, and we've been getting periodic updates at Finance Committee meetings. In December, we received an update about the first 5 months of the year, and there were some areas where things were tighter, other areas where we have some relief to balance that out. Scott's going to give the Q2 update on Friday, and the impression that he's given so far is that continues to be the case. Scott, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
The only thing I'd say is, yeah, it is a tight fiscal year, but we're going to land the fiscal year and we'll be fine. There's, as Tom mentioned, you know, we've got some areas of legal and some of our facilities costs due to some unforeseen incidents at Mabel I. Wilson School that we're looking at, and that those will actually be able to be covered through some of our hiring process and funds that we have in our salaries and our benefits lines. And each year in the meeting in June, we come to the board because the state allows us to do a 5% transfer from any cost center to another transfer to another cost center, because school budgets are, you know, voted on so early, and then you've got, you know, before you even expend it, you know, quite a bit of the year has gone by. So we'll be bringing those transfers to the board in June to take care of those areas where we think we're,
thanks,
you know, a little bit tighter, Denny. So okay.
I mean, over time, and while I've been on the board, I've been comfortable hearing this information through the Finance Committee. Historically, has there been precedent to have quarterly updates at the full board meeting? No.
It's been at the Finance Committee level,
Okay.
and then usually the Finance Chair will just report out a little bit about the financial update.
Mm.
And usually the audit's also handled at the Finance Committee level. So the auditor often will come in and do an audit summary for the Finance Committee. In many years we've done that. I think once I can remember the auditor coming to the full board, but that's generally not standard practice.
Great. And policy?
We have two policies coming for first read this evening. The first is policy BE, school board meetings. And this came for review with the policy committee, motivated by the shift to move school board meetings, our regular business meetings, to Thursday for starting in the next academic year. We would have needed to update it anyway because we were actually out of alignment. Previously, the policy listed that our regular business meetings were starting at 6:30 as they had been, but we shifted last year to move them to 6. So the updated language actually takes out any of the specifics regarding time and day of week, so that if we do need to make adjustments, we don't need to come back and revise the policy, and that we will be following our policy. And then the second for a first read is, excuse me, policy BDE, board standing committees. And really, you will see that there are not any significant changes to this policy, though the reason why it's coming for a first read is we are in the process of working on a new policy that as of right now, it's BDF with a draft title, other board committees and special committees / task forces. May not stay that way, but as a district, we only had a committee policy for our standing committees, which are policy and finance. And so we're looking to add policies to cover all of our other committees that are considered other committees, and then for any special committees or task forces that we need to convene. And in the future, we will need to revisit our bylaws as well to make sure that everything language-wise is in alignment across the policies and bylaws. And our next meeting is tomorrow.
I have a question on the school board meetings. Thank you for making the updates to some of that language, because, yeah, it was already outdated. I guess I have one question. It reads right now, it will hold regular business meetings once or twice a month. Can it say at least once a month?
So I think we looked at a couple other policies in other districts, and that was the wording that was used. So it doesn't box us in, because there's months like February where it really is once.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're worried that we might not have a meeting in a month. I'm only worried that, let's just say tonight was a snowstorm and we couldn't have the meeting and we couldn't find a way to reschedule it for some reason. Then we might be out of compliance with the policy.
Okay.
So generally we meet twice a month.
Yeah.
The board meets twice a month.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, and I was wondering too, just thinking about, if the public was looking, or if you're looking to become a board member and wanted to know when can I expect meetings, should there be more specificity in there?
I'm not sure the policy would necessarily be the place anyway to get that
That's
information.
what I was, it seemed pretty specific before, and is that
It's
out of
a little
alignment?
too specific.
Yeah.
I think for a while we were out of alignment with the policy, just the way the language was boxed in, and we've changed times, and it's the first time that the board is considering another day of the week, I think, in 30 years, 40 years. I think it's always been on Mondays.
Hopefully we don't regret that, right?
I know, or hopefully it's not a reason that it's always been on Mondays. But we're trying to give a lot of time for everybody to kind of build schedules, so that's why. But I think it's better to use language, and I think Ann reminded me, but our legal counsel thought it would be better just to keep it at a abstract level and not box ourselves in, not have the board box itself in.
As an aside, I also, even though my term is up and will not be subject to the Thursday meetings, I like that with a shift now, we also aren't running into the chance of conflicting with Cumberland Town Council.
Oh, because that's Mondays. Yep. And I just know we had to move it a lot for our Monday holidays too. Yeah. Great.
So you might recall that in the equity plan, policy BDE was something that that the equity committee would like to explore with the policy committee. And Anne, I think you kind of answered that question, but the equity committee is one that in particular, because it involves more than just the school board, we feel that it's important to protect the ability to have a broad membership. Is that something that can be discussed? How do you see steering committees, things like that? How might you see that policy playing out? Is that a question you can answer right now?
Well, currently, there is language in the draft about a application process for community members for committees where that is deemed a good fit, given the work of the committee. I don't have right now any specifics on that. I wanted to check in with Leanne about how we did that this year. So there isn't like a very structured approach to it, but just saying that that the board would solicit applications in order to have a broad representation.
Well, and I guess also just to clarify really quick, BDE is the standing committees, and we're looking at BDF, which would be other committees, which is where the equity committee currently. Right. So I did notice that in the equity plan, actually, that it probably should be changed to BDF as opposed to BDE.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Annika.
So I have a question too. So is my understanding correct? It won't be set for either Mondays or Thursdays, but it will be set according to the needs of the committee by the chair, 30 days.
Oh, are you
before.
talking about the school board?
Oh, no, sorry. Monday or Thursdays is for the school board regular meetings. That doesn't have to do with the committees.
Right. For the school
okay.
board. Right. Sorry, I shifted to the topic here.
Yeah,
School board.
and I was wondering too, just about, should there be some language about how far in advance the schedule is set? Because right now it just seems really open, but we have talked about them being Thursdays going forward with a draft plan.
So it says here notice of 72 hours ahead, which seems very quick.
So by practice, we set the board schedule. I say we, in our office, we set the board schedule with the board chair for the next year. So that schedule is out in public, but we've been waiting. We wouldn't send it out this early usually, but we've been waiting to see what the board was going to do with this policy before we did that. But we give plenty of notice for all of our regular meetings well in advance of the next school year, so everybody's got the schedule. We try to do that before March, so anyone running for the board would know what day it would be, and we have signaled our staff. I did send out a message to the staff several weeks ago saying that the board was considering this policy and that the board meetings might shift to Thursdays next year, depending on how this policy went. So as you begin planning for next year, just kind of keep that in mind, that there could be a shift, because it's the first time it could potentially shift in a long time.
And also, while I've let the members of the board know this, for anyone watching at home, we did also have the support of the teachers union for moving it to Thursday. So we consulted with them. And then regarding the 72 hours, I mean, that language is still in there too for times when we would need to call an additional regular business meeting because there's additional work that needs to be done, so.
Yeah, that would just be an out-of-schedule meeting. But, you know, by practice, we usually put all the meetings on a schedule and keep to that schedule as much as we can in terms of, you know, noticing and getting those things out.
But that is reminding me from a student perspective, if the meetings get moved to Thursdays, I don't know if we've asked about the students if that would work, or at least when we're looking for new students for next year to ensure that that's something that there are.
I think Melissa, she put it out to both of you as well.
Oh,
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm personally glad that I won't be here next year for Thursday meetings, because Thursday would not work the best for me, with Friday meets for every sport that I have, but I'm not going to be on the board next year. So.
We can't keep you, Tommy.
I feel like as long as there's like notice and basically we get the whole year schedule, it's easy enough to schedule around. I mean, it's nice because it's not like it's at 6, so.
Yeah, it starts early.
Yeah.
And then we did check with, or we did provide both towns that there might be a shift too. So both towns were aware that there could be a shift in our meetings. Yeah. But we didn't get any feedback on that.
Well, and I'm glad it doesn't conflict with Cumberland anymore. So, but yeah, speaking of time, I know we've been good about not going over 9, but after canceling our other meeting, we are going a little later tonight. So are we set with policy? Any other final questions on the first read? All right. Facilities, Christina.
Facilities. So we met on January 5th and tried to cover a lot of things that we haven't been covering because so many meetings have been spent on the new school. So for large areas, we went over the solar project that has been talked about for several years. Just got an update from Scott, like where are we at? It does seem that there's still conversations going on with the town. And effectively, it's on hold. It's still important, but it's not on the front burner because of all the other things we have going on. The food waste issue, slowly moving forward. It involves a lot of different groups, high school faculty, student green teams, EcoMaine, and Reynolds. And we pretty much identified 2 areas of concern, cost and student training of the recycling. And I believe, Scott or Jeff, you have an update. There was a meeting with the group, is that correct?
That would be Denny and Tommy who will give that update.
Perfect.
Okay.
You're on, Tommy.
Okay. Well, yeah, that was a great description. But we've had 2 meetings so far. One focusing on recycling, one focusing on food waste specifically. With recycling, we had a representative from EcoMaine come, and for composting we had, and as well as other representatives. And then for composting, we had Suzanne Lee, who works at the Mitchell Center for Sustainability at the University of Maine, and she has implemented food waste systems in a lot of schools throughout Maine, and has done these trial programs and has a lot of knowledge about what works, what doesn't work, and how you can be most efficient at each level of school, whether it's a school that has, whether the school's behaviors don't necessarily work with the idea of composting, or if they work really well. She was a super valuable insight, and we spent most of the meeting hearing from her and also sharing just a little bit about our thoughts and how the information that she shared might apply to the district. And then we have another meeting coming up on the 14th. And then after that, the group that is not the administrators will convene and bring a proposal here.
That's great. Thank you.
And Denny, if you have anything to add.
Well, I've just been very impressed by the energy coming up from this, from the, bottoms-up situation. We have a lot of student involvement. We have teachers that are engaged. Each building seems to be engaged, so there's a lot of forward motion here. And there's some low-hanging fruit, one of which is to go after paper waste, which is most of our waste out of the schools. And you can recycle that more than once, and we can do that through EcoMaine. So that's I think something that we could tackle and be successful early. Food waste is trickier, as you pointed out, because it depends on kiddos doing the right thing as they go down the line. And if at the end of the dump is food and trash, then you're stuck. So it's all about students doing the right thing. Once it gets out there, then we had the owner of Garbage and Garden attend with us, a Greeley grad from North Yarmouth, really high-powered guy, I thought. And once it's clean, they can take it and turn it into compost. So I think it's really exciting. Food waste is a giant issue in the world. We waste 40% of our food here in the United States, which is really criminal when you think how many people don't eat. And then there's all kinds of other climate change impacts because you're using up soil that you don't need to use up, and so on and so forth. So it's a really great initiative, and I'm proud of the team so far.
Yeah. And one more thing, Garbage Garden, I forgot to mention that, but they have talked about how they've updated their procedures, and a lot of the issues that we had that it sounded like we had initially with rodents and smell, and they've implemented procedures that will help that through having liners and just kind of cleaning the whole thing up.
That's really exciting. Thank you for this update.
Can I just add to it?
Sure.
So if you don't mind. So what we've done is we created a goal for the group, and we kind of put this ad hoc group together of people that had a lot of energy. And the goal is our next meeting to start creating action steps on moving food waste forward to begin with. Also the recycling, and then what we want to do is prepare a written plan which we can then bring to the school board to be able to kind of present what we're doing. And then the other part of that, which comes to the part of communicating to the district about recycling and food waste, and then communicating to the community on what we're doing. So there's several steps here that go through it, and then we'll see how things go once we get stuff implemented. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
So did I just hear an ad hoc committee for food waste will be made, so it'll break off from facilities?
It's made and it's moving forward.
Great, you can have it. Awesome. Thank you. I'm impressed. This topic has been around for so long, and it's really moving. So thank you, students. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Scott.
That's awesome.
You can have it. Great. Okay. Next thing we went over, because we hadn't had a chance to really go over it. Again, Scott would have more details, but the summer capital projects going forward. Good news, we stopped the middle school project as far as the modulars, correct? We do not need them until the summer of 2025, yes? And then maintenance, the revolving replacements, that's ongoing. Door replacements, hallways, treads and retaining walls, MIW doors, windows. I basically got the gist of it. So, oh yes, and 2 highlights, LED lights for the pool and resurfacing the track are 2 things up and coming that need to be addressed. And the high school students are exploring outdoor cafe area, and there's talk of putting in windows in that high school cafeteria, windows up high, for safety, but also for light. And again, did I miss anything, Scott? The master of all.
We've
capital
got a lot of
improvements.
projects planned again for this coming summer, so.
Yeah.
And the school revolving renovation funds, which you mentioned, Mabel I. Wilson School, the bid went out for the windows and doors that are to be replaced on the building, and we're waiting for the results back on that, and we're getting ready to start moving forward on the high school ventilation project for the science wing as well.
And lastly, I will say we had another facilities meeting since our last meeting on February 2nd, Friday. And I won't go over it in detail because you just pretty much heard as well the concept design yourselves. I would just add that when we were there, we had, as was mentioned, a lot of questions about the drop-off, the parking, in particular, concerns about that. And I would just say that they were very responsive. The plan and that part of it, at least, was indeed redesigned according to some of our comments or requests. So I would just say they've been very responsive when we've spoken. So I appreciate that very much.
Great.
And that's it.
Great. Thanks, Christina. Curriculum, Tom.
Curriculum, we met 2 weeks ago, and we had a good meeting. We were joined by administrators and teachers from Mabel I. Wilson and Greeley 4-5 to talk about the science of reading that Jeff was talking about before, and how they are piloting different curricula to bring that into their schools in a more formal way. This included going over the theoretical foundations that that align with the science of reading, and the different things that they're considering as they're trying to implement it. I'm sorry, I forgot my notes. If there are other things that I missed that other committee members want to share, I welcome you to.
You mentioned
Well, I just might comment, this has to do with something I heard a lot about when I was a superintendent, which is phonics or not phonics. And what's happened is that the world of academia, I think, has decided that phonics really are important, and the way of doing business before that was to de-emphasize them. So what our group here is reacting to that big sea change in how you teach reading. I'm sure this will be some of your comments, Jeff. And they're evaluating 3 different vendors who do it a different way. So it's quite a thing. And there's a lot of people that yell about it, in the world around the country about whether phonics or not phonics. But I think we're on the right course and have a very dedicated staff that's putting in a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, having taught students reading, students that don't have any reading, and my own son who struggled, phonics, they were thrown out. They were thrown out the door. I was in a school where the books, when the sea change was like whole language, whole reading, they'll figure it out. Literally, we were told to throw out books. They came and took away the books that were focused on phonics. And I cannot tell you how excited I am that phonics is back. It's not the same as, Dick and Jane, da-da-da-da. It's really new and improved, and just, it's huge. So many kids will be able to grab onto that. And the ones that don't need it as much, they'll get some of it and sail through. So I'm just applauding the teachers and everyone that, in previous boards and this board, that supported this, because it's going to be huge. It's awesome. We'll never go back.
It was encouraging too to see staff from 2 schools collaborating on this, so there's continuity in a student's experience as they go through the schools.
Great. Thank you. Kim, equity. Anything else?
So we have a
Can you bring up
draft
the
of the plan.
presentation again?
I'll
Let's do the
walk you through it
presentation
now.
again.
Yeah. I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. Ad hoc committee reports. I'm assuming there's been some.
So there was a dropout committee that Tim and I were there for, and they reviewed programs that they're following to address the dropout issue, which is not huge here, but it exists. They're following HiSET, Spring Ahead, Learning Works, and they were discussing further options that they could add into that cohort program, middle school MIW program, not program, but getting someone from those schools to be a rep on the committee, because it was clearly acknowledged around the table that the problem of dropout isn't just a high school problem. It starts far earlier for assorted reasons. And also they talked about getting, which I don't know if they've communicated to students yet, but maybe getting involved bigs and littles and the teams, the sports teams, teaching, and NHS has to do tutoring time, so you can be hooked into this too. And Mr. Furbish, the PATHS contact teacher, he has a grant recently that is supporting these students. Did I, Tim, add?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there was some nice dedicated time from the staff to pull out all like the recent dropouts and review the data, and to kind of like Kim's story earlier about like what the staff is doing. I mean, they knew everything about some of these students and who had dropped out and what their stories were. And so there was quantitative data, but an amazing amount of qualitative data where we can really assess like where are the risks and how far back does it go and what interventions should we try to prevent it and what are meaningful interventions. So I think it's, I was excited just to see like data and get some of the stories and the background of like just how much care and already goes into preventing dropout, but also like they stick with so many staff members, the ones that we lose and then the ones that we almost lost, you know. So it's a very powerful like committee. So yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Other ad hocs committees? Kim?
Just quickly, the GCA committee, we are in the process of getting a meeting going, but in the meantime, the calendar has been updated. So both in the district calendars page, there's the GCA tab is completely, well, it looks completely updated, and also on the GCA website itself. So it's just kind of fun to go through and look and see how much that auditorium is being used right now.
Wonderful. That's great. Other ad hoc committees?
Sure, I'll just mention that, so Profile of a Learner did meet again since our last meeting with Lawrence Alexander, and again on that committee it includes administrators, building principals, teachers, and we've gotten to the point of identifying some high-level themes, and I believe the next step is Lawrence working together with Jeff and the district leadership team to put some more language around those to bring back to the committee and then ultimately to the board.
Okay. I think that's it for committee reports. Moving on, communications. I'm not going to spend much time on this item. I did want to, just us as a board, to revisit our board goals. I did notice what was linked into the agenda is an old draft. Our actual board goals are posted on our board page. And just wanted to recognize the work that we put into coming up with these goals, and for us to be able to reflect back now that we're more than halfway through the year. I've asked Melissa to update the link in the agenda, but it is just on the main school board page. If board members can take a look at the goals, and maybe at a future meeting we can just touch base about how our progress has been this year. So,
There's the goals.
What?
They're up there.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So that was, I just wanted to mention that. And then we have some additional items for action that I think we need to enter back into executive session.
Yeah, I would just extend.
Okay. And then extend. We are going to extend the first executive session that we started at 5:30, and then can I do the motion for the next?
No, we have to come out and do that one.
Okay. All right. So, I think for our students, our meeting is complete,
Yes.
or?
Yeah, the meeting's complete, and then we just go back into executive.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I have a few syllables.
Yes. Thank you, Tommy and Sophia. Appreciate your time. Good
You're done.
seeing you guys.
You're okay.
And then,
Do you want to extend, basically go back into your executive, extend that executive?
yes, okay. And so for anyone following at home,
You have to make a motion and then vote, just make a motion and vote, and we'll go back into executive.
okay, I'd like to make a motion to extend,
The previous executive session, just extending it.
okay, I would like to make a motion to extend the executive session to discuss land acquisition pursuant of state statute MRSA 4056C. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, a motion.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.